Should be getting go. Should be getting going now, everyone. As you guys are trickling in here, start lighting the chat up. Kind of want to see where you guys are from, where everybody's hailing from today. And yeah, we'll give it a minute, and I'll start going into the introduction here. Let us know where you're all from. Cool. All right. Unracked is a live conversation series from Bridge Athletic. Bridge provides coaching tools to world-renowned organizations like Philadelphia Eagles, Naval Special Warfare, and Westside Barbell. They provide those very same tools for coaches like me and you to use in our communities to deepen the training experience. Unracked is a free educational series Bridge puts on to break down the training systems, methods, and philosophies that drive performance at the highest level. Each episode takes you inside a specific approach, how it's built, how it's applied, and how it evolves under real world conditions. Today's guest holds a bachelor's of health and promotion fitness with a minor in coaching from Otterbein University. He graduated from the American Institution of Alternative Medicine and Neuromuscular Therapy. He's a functional range systems instructor and travels throughout the world teaching and lecturing. In addition to maintaining a private practice located in Columbus, Ohio, he co-owns and maintains a virtual internal strength training platform, Gain Access, and actively programs the training process of physical capacity for skill acquisition for multiple professional and amateur athletes. He's also worked an extensive, he has an extensive competitive career in bodybuilding and has worked for and trained at the Westside Barbell Club since 2011. John Quint is a legendary coach, highly sought after by the global community of elite athletes across multiple disciplines. From my point of view, he's the single most knowledgeable coach I've come across. I met John while interning at Westside Barbell in 2019. I was blown away by the depth of his expertise. So, John, welcome to the show, man. Happy to have you here today.
Hey, Cooper, it's good. It's good to be here. Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to this.
Hell yeah, man. So I guess I want to start off just kind of stories I have not heard, just about your career and kind of what things were like before you started working with FRS and Westside. So I'm very curious, like how you even got into the field in the first place.
Yeah. So I got into the field through my dad. So my dad was a physical education teacher. He's retired. He's still in coaching though. He's 73, still coaching, still training.
That's awesome.
Uh, yeah, and so kind of like I'll be kind of brief, right? So I'm a September birthday. So when I went to college, I was 17. And I remember my dad telling me when I was in middle school, hey, like everyone's going to be bigger and stronger than you. So you better start to figure out how to train. Right. And so at that time, he was reading like a lot of Charles Poliquin books
Hmm.
and we were training. Like I remember starting to train when I was like literally in like fifth grade, sixth grade, all the way through, and then just kind of fell in love with training. And then recently I was talking with Dave Tate on Table Talk
Hmm.
and we were kind of talking that there was like this point where it's like I'm using, let's say, resistance training to get better at wrestling and football, but then there's kind of this like inflection point where it's like, well, I like training now more than the other sports,
Yep.
right? And so that shift for me, I was fortunate. Football got me into college, which was good. And then once I got to college and I kind of got to study what I wanted to study,
Hmm.
I was able to kind of academically succeed, let's say. And then from there, it's kind of like, I went into bodybuilding, and then through bodybuilding, essentially ended up meeting a lot of people. So like with my background in bodybuilding, with my background in neuromuscular therapy, I essentially was able to meet like, and being located in Columbus, Ohio, I run into George Halbert at a gym,
Hmm.
right? And then it's like we start talking training. Next thing I know, it's like, okay, I'm now training with George Halbert, which looking back on it is a crazy thing because at the time I didn't know who George was. I was training at the Power Shack in Westerville. I should say this. I was training at the Power Shack in Westerville, and at the time there was a lot of highly competitive individuals there. Paul Key was there. George Halbert was doing his rehab work there. I mean, there were so many guys. I remember I trained with the bodybuilders, but the powerlifters would train at the same time. And I remember, I know Phil, the guy that owns the gym, and he had to buy more plates because there wasn't enough plates on the side. That like So there was like legit individuals training there because we'd be training legs, they'd be doing bench. Well, we'd run out of plates, right? And so like
Yeah.
these were like legitimate guys. And so, just kind of being in that environment ever since like, I was in middle school, I think it just created a network of a lot of individuals that know how to train. And then when I met George, um, when I met George, that's kind of when I guess that's maybe the gateway to, let's say, West Side, because prior to that, it was like strictly bodybuilding stuff,
Mm-hmm.
right? But then when I met George, I'd never really trained to get stronger. I remember the first time he came up to me at a gym. Uh, well, let me say this too. His magazine, there was a Powerlifting USA magazine with him on the cover of it as the king of the bench press. And so I
Mm-hmm.
remember, this is before internet. So I remember looking at him and being like, okay, I think I see that guy. At the time, I was getting ready for collegiate nationals. So I was going to school, I was working,
Yep.
and I was getting ready for collegiate nationals. And I was trying not to have my training get disturbed. So I would go super late at night, train by myself. Turns out that's what he was doing as well.
Yep.
So I'll never forget, he comes up to me. He comes up to me. I don't know this dude, but I know for a fact he does something because you can vouch for this. Like his chest is so physically developed, right?
Yeah, it's like not human, man. Like they don't make him like that ever. He was 1-1. Yep.
Yeah, and so I was bench pressing 405, and I would do essentially tempo work. So I would come down at a 4 count, hold, press up, and that
Mm-hmm.
was kind of like my compound movement on my chest day. Well, I end up doing 405. I get 8 reps, and he comes up to me, doesn't introduce himself. He just goes, "How much can you bench press?" And I remember thinking, well, 405 for 8. And he was like, "No, like, how much do you bench press?" And I was like, "Well, I don't, like, I'm using the bench press to try to get like bigger." And I remember telling him, he goes, "Well, why don't you go over 405?" And I told him, I go, "I'm in the sport of bodybuilding. So like if I can't develop my pecs using 405, I'm in the wrong sport." And
Yeah.
so it was kind of weird because like it looked like it was awkward because he was seeing it through a strength lens. I was
Yep.
seeing it through a bodybuilding, like biological lens. But we hit it off. We start talking because at the time he had just had a supraspinatus repaired again, and they
Mm-hmm.
had told him, "Hey, listen, if this thing goes, like it's over. Like there's nothing there to reattach." So then what ended up happening was in my off season, I was talking to this dude named Gene Weaver. He used to train at Westside Barbell with Tony Ramos.
Mm-hmm.
So he was at the gym too. And I remember looking up after I would talk to George because I'd do cardio and we would just talk about training. And I remember thinking, like, man, I wonder if I should do like a bench press meet just to kind of, so kind of stagnating from all the in season dieting and training for bodybuilding. And so I remember Gene was like, listen, if you win the Ohio bench press championship, which is down at the fairgrounds at the state fair, he's like, you get into the fair for free, you get
Yep.
access to fair food, and you get a battle axe. And I remember thinking, man, a
That's
battle
pretty
axe would
sweet.
be, yeah. So I'll never forget. I go into the gym. I see George. It's on a Saturday. I'm doing cardio, and I told him, I go, hey, I think I'm going to take you up on that. And he goes, well, what do you want to do? And I was like, well, I want to do this. He's like, no, you're not doing that. Uh, so then I got to train with him for like an 8 week training block.
Yeah.
So I had 8 weeks to get ready for this bench press meet, which was at the YMCA on the west side of Columbus, just down the road.
Yep.
It was a great experience for me, and I'm forever grateful for George Halbert, that training experience, everything that he taught me. I can't say enough positive how much that influenced me, the trajectory, and then what ended up happening was after that bench press meet, it was frustrating. It was a good learning experience for me because I got a little cocky with the weight. I smoked 540. I went back in for 570, and I remember there was a dude named Drex Welch.
Mm-hmm.
He used to hand off all of George's stuff.
Yep.
And so I remember I missed this thing so bad because I'm not gonna lie, it went up so fast I feel like I lost control of my right arm.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
right, because I'm used to bands, chains. Like this is the first time I'm using straight weight, and I remember
Yeah.
when
You
I
just
hit
launch that shit. Yeah. Yep.
right, and so I remember thinking, George was like, he's like, listen, you pick your opener, something that's easy. So I picked 500. Dude, I smoked 500. I remember going back and telling George, I go, listen, man, because they had 100-pound plates instead of 45s and no accommodating resistance. So the
Yeah.
brakes were off.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
remember telling him, I go, that does not feel like 500. And then that's when he jumped to 540. I smoked that. So I'm thinking, hey, I'm just go out here and smoke this other one. And that didn't happen. Well, what ended up happening was he must have talked to Louis Simmons.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So then George and I are talking. He's like, hey, Louis Simmons wants to meet you. And I'm like, holy shit, because I went to school on the west side of Columbus. My actual position coach in football, Fred Reeser, trained at West Side Barbell. Okay, so my
Yeah.
position coach, who's a defensive end, uh, he trained at West Side Barbell with Chuck Vogelpool. There's
Hmm.
actually old YouTube clips of a dynamic effort lower day on YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, he's in there. So
Yep.
that was
That's sick.
so I knew what Louis Simmons. I knew West Side Barbell, and so I remember I go down there to meet Louis. He's super nice, and it's funny. I had this conversation with Dave Tate, and it was a really good conversation. This is after the podcast, and I'm thinking like, oh, Louis must be interested in getting shoulder joint treatment because I was treating George's shoulder.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so Louis is like, hey, like, yeah, like I don't care, like just come up here on Sundays at first and start treating. Well, listen, he didn't give a shit about his shoulder getting treated. He wanted me to hit a 600-pound raw press.
Yeah. Nice.
Okay, like
Nice.
that didn't occur to me till like because then I was telling him I'm like he's like George is telling me you're gonna hit this raw press and I'm like yeah I mean according to whatever numbers George has that's within reach and I essentially my lack of ability to mentally compress to execute the lift in that brief amount of time like I needed to work on that. That's something that George and
Mm.
I discussed extensively is the in bodybuilding you don't have to compress until that sixth, seventh, eighth rep.
Yeah. Yep.
In powerlifting, it's like the
That's
guns to
that
your
one
head,
right away.
right? So
Hmm.
so mentally, it was hard for me because in training, when I was training for that bench press meet, and when I trained with when I trained with powerlifters at Westside, I would always be able to kind of go out to deep waters. Like
Hmm.
volume was kind of my friend, right?
Yep.
Like they were used to this like instantaneous compression, and I was like, if I can survive that on the back end of the workout, I'll crush all of them,
Yep.
right?
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that, actually a guy you worked with, Max Wessel. When I first started working with Max, Max is an all-American wrestler heavyweight. Dude's got, kind of looks like the guy over your left shoulder there, if anybody recognizes him. And the just seeing him go from being that volume guy because he power lifted for 3 years and have him having to make that switch from essentially slow twitch probably more dominant to more of a fast twitch sport. That's hard to do, man. Like it's not easy and you need the right training interventions to really make something like that happen in a human body. So I think like from your point of view, I know obviously like the topic of today is mobility and such, but with these principles that you're kind of starting to unpack already, like how are you kind of defining that term in that respect? And maybe we can start kind of going into some of the training science stuff with that.
Yeah, perfect. So it's funny. I never cared for mobility.
Hmm.
I know we kind of had this conversation off prior to this, just in personal conversation. So
Yeah.
it's funny. Like I've never trained with the intent to have mobility. I train with the intent to get better joint function so that I can do with my joints what I want to do. Like I'll give you a case in point. The first time I ever trained dynamic effort with George Halbert, I
Yeah.
was blown away. I remember I tell people if you would have if there was I wish there was a video because you would say, okay, George is doing dynamic effort, but what is John doing?
Hmm.
right? Like I had no idea at that point in time that you could move a barbell at that type of speed. You could be that violent with a barbell. I had no idea. I remember it blew my mind up. Like, I'm like, dude, this is the crazy. It literally, I remember watching him being like almost in shock. I'm like, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen. Right. And like, I think it's one of those things where you literally have to see it, where you're like, what the, like, this is
Yeah.
insanity. Right.
Hmm.
And so, so it's funny. So, like, the reason why I say that is because, I take training maxes. I like to train at these velocities. I like to try to move a bar very violently. Like, that's what I like to do in regards to like that strength side. Okay.
Hmm.
So, like, if I'm going to do that, like, my joints better be in a state of function. So, like,
Hmm.
I guess the mobility that I want is the ability for me to be mobile enough so that I can train with these higher loads and with these, let's say, sub-maximal loads at these velocities. That's fun to me, right? and
Yeah.
so and so I don't really, the majority of joint training, which all the joint training that I do with Brian Fox, who's a manual practitioner out in California. It's on Gain Access, so like
Yep.
anybody can see the joint specific training that we do, which would then probably fall under that category of mobility, right?
Yeah.
The difference
Hmm.
is I'm not doing it to be mobile. I'm doing it for joint function, which then,
Yep.
like, if that kind of logic makes sense.
Yeah, so let me try and explain it in my own terms here. You sort of see like this broader term of mobility as like, hey, obviously we're trying to maybe gain access to like
Yeah.
more options to kind of play with. And you're saying that's the specific option you want to go after is that violent velocity there, but there are other options people can obviously go after. Am I right?
Yeah, for sure. For
Beautiful.
sure. Yeah, because think about it, like let's say like in the sport of bodybuilding, it's like another option. I really like the way you phrase that. Another option would be if I can gain access to a little bit more joint range of motion, I gain access to then more tissue that now I can actually stimulate that tissue with training,
Hmm. Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So like that was always my intent in regards to training, and it wasn't mobility. So like I don't, but I mean, I understand why the term exists, right?
Hmm.
Like I understand why people are so interested in it. I think mobility is almost like an emergent behavior, like speed strength or like absolute strength
Hmm.
in and of itself. It's just I don't take it. I don't personally take my training to that next step. I'm just utilizing like the joint specific training so that then I do have those options, like you're saying, to be like, okay, today I'm going to take a training max, or today I'm going to do some speed strength, or maybe I'm going to do some like repeated efforts to try to stimulate muscle tissue.
Got it. Okay. And can you kind of talk about these emergent behaviors? I know obviously in the context of like working with FRS and being an FRC MS coach myself, like I think I understand what you mean, but can you kind of cover that topic a little more broadly before we kind of dive into following questions I've got?
Yeah. Say the question one more time.
So I guess understanding like emergent behavior, right? And
Oh,
what you
okay.
mean by
Okay.
that, and like kind of, I guess there's a point A and a point B, right? And the emergent behavior is probably what takes you between those things. So what, unpack that concept a little bit for the coaches in here, and then we'll go deeper.
Okay. Yeah. I got it. I got it. Okay. So think about it this way. So the Soviets came up with what's called special strengths.
Yep.
Okay. And special strengths was essentially the Soviets' way of understanding different types of strength. So let's
Hmm.
say that you have an output over here.
Yep.
That output could be anything. It could be a bench press. It could be a high jump. It could be an offensive lineman blocking, like
Yep.
all of
Yep.
those. So it's like let's take a lineman blocking. So you got an offensive lineman blocking a defender.
Hmm.
Okay, that block, you can view that as an emergent behavior,
Okay. Okay. Perfect.
right? And so that's an emergent behavior. And what we did at Absolute Sports Science is and so the Soviets adopted this concept
Hmm.
and they discussed this concept, but it was mostly kind of in track and field because they were trying to figure out like how do we define this emergent behavior so that we can reverse engineer programming to get us so that more of that behavior occurs,
Yeah. So
right?
you're trying to get a bigger canvas, right? To work with towards that emergent behavior. Because if it's this big, well, there's only so much we can get out of it. But what you're saying is we need to get a bigger canvas so that we can, make this shit I don't know, the ceiling in Venice, or in the Vatican, right? Like make it beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so what we ended up doing was we started to view things, we wanted to take special strengths into like
Mm.
2025.
Yeah,
So
cool.
so so I'll give you a specific example. Something that we discuss extensively is reactive strength.
Yep.
Okay. And I got to give a lot of credit to Dr. Michael Chivers because he's the one that kind of came up with this entire construct. And then it was kind of like the genie's out of the bottle and this thing's been growing ever since, right?
Yeah.
But essentially, if you think about reactive strength and you look at like the current definition, like
Mm-hmm.
reactive strength would be considered a special strength.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Like
Yep.
like speed strength, an easy way to think about it would like speed strength would be like the nervous system's ability to organize its biology to output at like the highest attainable speed,
Yep. Yep.
right? So that's kind of like that's how we've conceptualized special strengths, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we have two buckets. So the definition that we propose, right, in the art and science of programming is that there's a top down component, which is essentially the neural network of absolute strength. So it's the nervous system,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it's like this nervous system's ability to essentially funnel output into the
Yeah.
biology. I don't know why there's
I
hearts.
like
Maybe,
that.
yeah.
Maybe I can get some too. I like what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when those two things meet,
Yep.
right, and they interface, so when you have a neurology interfacing with the biology, you're
Yep.
going to get this emergent behavior, right? Okay. And so that's the emergent behavior that we're talking about. So like if you have an NFL lineman who's trained their nervous system to be able to generate a large magnitude of force, they have high levels of, let's say, absolute strength, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then that neural network, and they have good joint function, they have good reactive strength. Then
Mm-hmm.
all those two kind of like biological things interface with this top down, and then you get blocking, and that's why we call it lineman special strength,
Mm.
because
Okay.
it's a special strength that emerges from the lineman, which is a huge paradigm shift. Because essentially, what we're saying is, listen, we're not looking at the lineman as just a skill person. We're actually treating them like an actual absolute strength athlete,
Yeah.
which is different.
Got it. Okay. And so I wanna unpack, the top down versus the bottom up. You said there's biology and neurology, they connect. You find this emergent behavior that or
Mm-hmm.
ideally you do that you're going for. I'm assuming the kind of training that you're using is there to get those things to mesh at a higher rate, right? So what's happening when they're disconnected though, right? And can you
Mm-hmm.
talk me through that?
Yeah. Okay. That's phenomenal. Okay. Yeah. So let's have this conversation. So so this is something that we're actually seeing right now. So at Absolute, we discuss it. We say that we're living in a reactive strength paradigm where there
Mm-hmm.
is a disconnect, where the nervous system has outpaced the bottom up connective tissue's ability to react and transmit force. And
Mm-hmm.
so what you see is like, think about like the NBA playoffs, right?
Yep.
We saw systematically three Achilles tendons blow up, but then
Yeah.
systematically through the entire season,
Yep.
right?
Yeah, that
Okay,
didn't just
now,
happen that day. That was built up over time, right? So,
correct. So think about what we didn't see. We didn't see reactive strength.
mm,
When you should see it, the athlete COD, change of direction, but they kept going. Why? Because the tissue yielded. That's not a nervous system thing. That's a
yep,
tissue yielding. So that's
yep,
decoupled, right? And if you look
totally.
at kind of the strategies that the NBA has proposed, they're using the wrong metrics. Let's say, not. I don't want to say the wrong metrics. This is where you need to have Dr. Shivers on. But
Yeah,
if you look at RSI, like if they're using RSI, which is the relative strength index, to
yep,
measure, like that's not a good index of actual reactive strength according to the definition that we propose
yeah.
about this top down bottom up, right?
Okay, yep.
But
I want
to
to
answer
pause
your
there real quick just to say that like the RSI that they're measuring on force plates, right? You're talking about that is the metric and they're trying to leverage that. But you're saying this is the wrong parameter or at least not a complete picture, right?
It's yes. So
Okay.
listen, it's a good parameter to use. It's
Yep.
useful. Okay. But the problem is this is our belief from what we know.
Hmm.
Okay. So the RSI index is going to be predominantly neurological in nature. So
Yep.
it's going to give you the top half of reactive strength, but
Okay.
it doesn't give you the bottom half.
Has
Okay. So
nothing to do with the biology at all. And how would you know?
correct,
Yep.
because those feedback loops are missing in performance staff's building. Because so that's why. So when you're talking about decoupling, think
Hmm.
about this. Think about this. Think about you're a strength coach in 2025, and your goal and your job. Think about like Louis Simmons. He's
Hmm.
trying to scale up neurology as much as he can.
100%. Yeah. Output, output,
Okay,
output. Get the most weight on the bar. Yep.
okay, and then how he solved the problem, right? So I remember his best friend, Louis' best friend. Why can't I think of his name? He played for the Canton Bulldogs. Oh, what is his name? I can't remember his name. Anyway, long story short,
Yeah.
he would call me. He's unfortunately he just recently passed.
Okay.
They told me about it, but his grandson told me like 2 weeks ago at the gym. So, but he would always call me and he would tell me, oh, these bench shirts, he'd be shitting on these bench shirts, all these, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's funny, like I would try to explain to him, I go, the reason why Louis wants that stuff is because he's running up to a bottom up constraint and he doesn't got time for it. He's chasing all time world records.
Yeah.
So
He's gonna
he's like,
throw
listen,
artificial tissue on you, and it's gonna help you lift the bar.
exactly. Okay,
Okay.
so here's what I start to see happening, and you probably see happening as well.
Hmm.
Okay, so what happens is the strength coach. So the Soviets, what the Soviets did, what Louis Simmons did, showed us like, listen, this nervous system is scalable, right? You look at accommodating resistance that will gets added into there. You look
Hmm.
at like we're seeing these neurological outputs that are going, dude, this is crazy. Case in point, look at Chuck Vogelpool pull a deadlift that's an all-time world record. He just holds it and is yelling at everybody, saying like, "I can do more." Like, dude, this is when you look at the context of it. Like, if you've
Hmm.
pulled a deadlift, you're like, "What I'm seeing is crazy. Like, this is insanity." Okay, well, that stuff has so many coaches from all over the world went to West Side Barbell, talked to Louis Simmons. They start to incorporate these methods. Well, guess
Hmm.
what? Louis would just put he would just put bench shirts on these guys,
Yep.
right? You
He put
can't
me
do
in
that.
briefs when I was there, dude. I was like, I gotta do 315. Like, I just got out of Marine Corps. My shit was buckled for endurance stuff. Yeah, no, I hear you. I hear you.
Right? What? So think about it. So now what you have is everybody, because of Louis, everybody knows how to systematically really scale the neurological side, what we call the neurological side of point B. But then the
Hmm.
biological side, like nobody does anything until it blows up. It's like my joint hurts, and now you're looking at a joint. Oh, this
Yeah.
connective tissue yielded. Now we're going to actually look at connective tissue.
But
Nobody's
there's whispers of that behavior emerging, right? That like connective tissue hurting long before it starts to hurt, right? So is
yes, for
that the
sure.
foundational level you're trying to like build up is make sure that like we just don't even get to that point.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So essentially to get back to that decoupling, you have strength coaches doing such a good job and the
Hmm.
strengths and the but where's the cultivation of connective tissue? Where's the cultivation of joint function? That's normally in a clinical space. But what if they're not what if they're not working in unison? Well, you're gonna
Hmm.
have a ton of reactive, you're gonna have a ton of biological problems. Tiger Woods, case in point, all of his issues, joint connective tissue, nervous
Hmm.
system asymmetrically scaled, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so right, like the cases are
Hmm.
like you can just go down any organization and you're like the biological side of stuff is in regards to the special strengths, like that's where everything's lacking. That's why
Yeah.
it's like we're in a new paradigm. The paradigm isn't we know how to scale neurology, but that's
Yeah.
why we have this new definition of special strength where it's like, hey, the biology isn't getting thrown in the trunk and then we're just taking it wherever. It's in the passenger seat, and we're trying to essentially have this ecological scaling where we're doing both in conjugation with each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, okay, gotcha. So your system's looking at both of those things, and I guess like let's go a little deeper on, the ways we make it happen in a good way, and kind of I guess it's probably a methods, type discussion there, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So if you think about it, let's discuss reactive strength.
Yep.
Okay, so our definition of reactive strength at absolute is essentially the ability of the neural network of absolute strength, the top-down thing, to essentially be in a holding position. So it's a holding isometric so that the
Okay.
bottom-up connective tissue can actually react, right? So if you
Okay.
think
Yep.
about it, like there's always going to be a neuromuscular lag time.
Always. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Makes
Okay,
sense.
okay.
Mhm.
Which means the connective tissue has to have the ability to react before the nervous system starts to send top-down signaling.
Yep. Totally.
Okay, that's why we also have a new definition of reversal strength, because now
Okay.
reversal strength has a different neural intent where now the tissue is violently changing direction to
Right, because
reverse.
we're going from eccentric to concentric there, and you're talking about that moment in time.
Exactly.
That transition point happens isometrically.
Yes,
Okay.
100%. Okay, so how do we combine those two? So through innovation. So this is exciting for me. So um, we did it. It's called an internal isometric continuum. And what we
Okay.
did was we looked at a consensus statement of all the isometrics and what is being done from a research perspective. And they have pressing isometric muscle actions, PIMAs, or
Mm-hmm.
holding isometric muscle action, which is
Schemas.
yielding.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, HEMAs, PIMAs are HEMAs, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then we were like, okay, so in what they say, what the literature says, I mean, there's a lot of nuance, right, to this. And like,
Of course.
we have a whole isometric continuum that gives practitioners the coaching cues for how they should be skewing the coaching of isometrics. But
Yep.
if it's holding, it's going to be predominantly connective tissue. And if it's pressing, it's going to be predominantly neurological.
Okay.
Okay. And so let me just unpack that for a second. Like think about it. If you do a yielding isometric, like if I
Yep.
have this and I'm trying not to let it go down,
Yep.
right? I'm holding into the tissue.
Yes. Yep.
So the cue is more internal. But if I'm going to do like an overcoming or PIMA,
Yep.
I'm thinking now about what I'm pressing into, and now I can press as hard as I can. And now I'm going to elicit this maximal momentary effort if I so choose to, which is
Yes.
much
Yep.
more neurological in nature.
Right. And why? Answer me that. Why is it
Yeah,
more
the
neurological
reason
in nature?
the reason why is because to build biological tissue, like think about it from a Soviet's perspective, they
Yep.
came up with the repeated efforts method
Right. Which
because
you
you
need
need
yielding damages accrued over time.
yeah, you need more time under tension for the biology so the biology gets
Okay.
stimulated.
Yeah.
So if you
Yeah.
so if you take a training max, right, like your nervous system is going to scale up and compress, but it's not enough time to stimulate biological tissue.
I'm tracking. Yeah, it's the difference between the 1 rep max and the 10 rep max is effectively like, a way to probably think about it in layman's terms.
Yes,
Okay.
100%. Okay, so that's why a PIMA, that's one of the reasons why a PIMA is you're thinking about something externally. So like
Hmm.
when I'm in the clinic and I'm treating people, I'm like, hey, hold your leg in place. Because now they're thinking about holding their leg in place. And now I can start to like put resistance on that. And that's a
Hmm.
yielding, but they're holding into the tissue. And I can continue
Hmm.
to coach that instead of them thinking about like pressing into something, which the pressing into something then takes the intent and it drives it externally, and they're now more external and neurological. And then obviously they can ramp that up to their maximal momentary effort as well.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Okay. So now that we have that, one of the guys that trains at the gym that I'm at,
Hmm.
you for sure know him, is Jim
Yep.
Seitzer of Bandbell.
Yeah. 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 Jim's an awesome dude. Yep.
Okay, so one of Louis' first training partners, and he's got the earthquake bar, the bamboo bar.
Hmm.
Anyway,
Hmm.
we're Dr. Shivers and myself are working on this reactive strength thing to try to understand it. because we have to understand reactive strength, not in a definition in a textbook, or not in a way that enables us to pass a test to get a certification. We need to understand, how do we actually program for this special strength?
Yes.
Okay.
As real world as it could possibly be.
Correct.
Yep.
Okay. So what ends up happening is, and we're both extensively training. And so, we're essentially, Einstein has a good quote. And one of my business partners, his name's Olin Kreutz, who we have Lyman Special Strength. We always joke around. I have it downstairs too in my clinical room, which probably, now that I think about it, may not be a good thing. But it says, if we knew what we were doing, it wouldn't be called research, would it? And it's by Einstein.
Nice. I love that. That's a good way to think about it.
Yeah. So we're doing research. So our training is research. Okay. So what ends up happening is, I'm sitting there thinking like, okay, I've trained for speed strength. I've trained for absolute strength. I've trained for joint function. I know how to program all of those highly effectively, but like, I don't know how to program reactive strength, which makes sense because as a bodybuilder, I never had to train for it.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. And so we're playing, one of the things that we have in the internal strength model is we have maxims. They're called the maxims of strength. And that's how we control intensity, so that we can make intensity either stimulating, retaining, or essentially like a detraining. Okay.
Right. Okay. Yep.
And so one of that is load.
Okay.
Okay.
One of that. What are the others?
Intent and effort.
Okay.
So intent, effort, and load.
Okay.
So I'll walk you through one real quick. Max effort method. Okay. So the load is maximal, right?
Yep.
Load is maximal. The intent is output at your maximal effort, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you got load is maximal, intent is going to be maximal, and the effort is going to be maximal. Does this make sense? So like, the load is going to constrain the athlete, so that the neural network has to find all of its motor neurons to be able to output.
I'm gonna try and answer that. So you're saying that obviously, if I have a 1 rep max bench, right? There's like effectively only one output that I can do to achieve that weight. We're talking put a feather on the bar and I could not hit it, right? It's going to force me into one movement pattern around that. But you're saying maybe, and if maybe I'm wrong in this, but like lighter weights or some different element of load opens up the amount of things I can do with that weight. Such as to say, like, if my max is 315 on bench and your max is 500 on bench, you're going to be able to take 315 and craft different things with that than I can, because it's my one fucking movement option there. But I could do the same craft with, like, let's call it 225. Am I wrong, or am I holding on here?
No, you're right.
All right, cool.
You're right. You're right. So think about it. That load, your maximal load, constrains your nervous system to be like, we need everything online.
Yes.
Which means the biology doesn't get the stimulus that it deserves.
Right.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. I'm tracking.
You tracking. Okay. Yep. So if we want to train reactive strength, right, we need to use submaximal loading.
Yes. Yep. 100%. Okay. And you can probably never get to your true max effort in a lot of field sports, right? Like, maybe I'm wrong about that, but like, I don't know. I feel like a wide receiver running his route because he has to move 3-dimensionally can never get what they could run in a 100-meter sprint on a track, right? So the sub-maximal elements are where they probably need to live to develop that skill. Probably a bad example, but
no, yeah, for sure. You want them, yes, for skill acquisition. I think okay. So remember, you have PIMAs and you got HEMAs.
Yes.
Okay, so we came up with what's called oscillatory isometric muscle actions.
Okay.
Just stay with me.
OIMAs?
Yep.
I think I've seen posts about that. Yep. Okay.
Listen, these are phenomenal for reactive strength.
Okay.
Like in the clinical setting too. Like, I treat for reactive strength daily. Okay. Like if you think about clinical space is going to be the biological side of point B, which is essentially joint function and reactive strength.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
you're trying to cultivate like more joint functions or whatever, and then essentially reactive strength, which is going to be more of the bottom up element, all that connective tissue. Like, do you have enough tissue there? Does the tissue know how to go to the length? Does the tissue know how to stress stiffen? All of these bottom up self organizing behaviors. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so stay with me. So now, but load, as you know from your time at Westside Barbell, so load can be static, meaning we're going to use just straight plates.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
But you can modulate load, right? Like for instance, accommodating resistance, bands and chains is a form of load,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? Okay.
Yeah.
And those are
Yeah.
going to be more dynamic in nature because you're
Mm-hmm.
going to get unloading and then reloading. Okay.
Yep.
Right. And
Yep.
that's going to essentially enable more neural output as joint angles become advantageous.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yes.
so let's say that so how you use oscillating isometric muscle actions is you take a percent of straight weight. So let's use there's a bench press example that Paul Leduc did, where
Mm-hmm.
essentially what you do is you take, so let's just say there's 100 pounds on the bar, right? So 100 pounds is your sub max in the bench press. So you want to build reactive strength in the bench press,
Yes.
specifically for the bench press. Okay, so what you would do is you're going to have to pick a sub maximal weight. Why? Because the target is going to be highly biological.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
so
Yep.
so what ends up happening is, let's say you do a bench press, you lower down and you catch the bench press. So you don't lower to your chest. You catch into the tissue.
Yep.
Okay. If you have 40% of the weight is oscillating, so it's in a band and it's
Mm-hmm.
suspended. It's either, I like to use chains, but it could be
Mm-hmm.
it could be a kettlebell suspended. So the weight's
Yep.
going to oscillate. So as you catch the
It's
kettlebell, let's
it's
say,
doing that transition point over and over again that you talked about between isometric and concentric, right? It's forcing you to do that like longer, essentially.
so so what it's forcing you to do is, as the weight oscillates, if you're doing a hold,
Yeah.
so if your top down nervous system is holding, the weight's oscillating. So that's an isometric because you're holding, but the
Yeah.
white connective tissue is doing this to
Yeah.
then dissipate the force.
And then restabilize it, right? Almost like
Yeah.
if you can achieve stillness, that's a good rep.
So if once you achieve the stillness, so once the load is no longer oscillating,
Yeah.
it's because you diffused it into your tissue. So your white tissue
Yeah. Yeah.
interfaced with the red so that now it diffuses it. And now we're building reactive strength.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'm
Does this
tracking,
make
dude. That's
sense?
fucking awesome. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because that's where all the injuries happen. It's not typically we don't see middle of the muscle belly, right? It's like down close to the joint or, at kind of the end of the tendon where it meets the muscle and such. So, yeah, 100% makes sense.
Yeah. So that's where you get, hopefully that answers the question. That's how you start to integrate the two together to then
Mm-hmm.
get this emergent behavior of reactivity, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
now as a strength coach, now you start to have loading parameters. And now you're like, okay, well, now I know what load to be able to train this, right? And now
Mhm.
it opens up, right? It opens up what the intent behind the art and science of programming is to unleash programmers.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's
Yeah.
specific for anybody that's programming anything. What we
Yeah.
want to do is we want to give you mental models so that you can train like what we say is the amount of special strengths are only limited by your imagination. Because when
Yeah.
you start to see of all the different behaviors, right, now you can be super, super specific in regards to what it is that you're training.
Okay. Okay, yeah, and so I don't know, maybe it'd be good to talk through a few examples, right? Like let's go through some extreme continuums here. Let's say ultra marathon runner, right?
Okay.
Let's just start there, and I'll come up with a couple others as you're talking.
So ultra marathon runner, what we would do is we would what we call where the athlete competes at, we call it the level of competition.
Okay.
Okay. So the level of competition is different than the level of adaptation. The level of adaptation is the internal, the inside of the athlete. The level of competition is where they're competing for this, like in a sport. Okay. Okay. So what we would do, we call it athlete typing. So we would take the athlete, we would go based off the level of competition. This is not an absolute strength athlete, although they do need absolute strength, right? So we'll keep the numbers simple. Let's say that this is a very thin marathon runner at 100 pounds.
Yeah.
Okay. They probably just need to be at like a 200-pound neurological output,
Because they
right?
never reach that peak. It's those smaller hits over the duration of that entire time.
Yeah. And like, like how the Soviets would say is they would say, listen, strength endurance, which is, let's say that that's where they would be at.
Yeah.
Like that's still going to pull from absolute strength. It's still going to pull from the neural network.
Yeah.
Okay, so one of like a heuristic that we have for programmers is every week you have to be doing something to tap into this neural network so that you're making new synergies and you're cultivating new capacities neurologically.
You're trying to get that mesh to happen between neurological and biological every week.
Yeah.
It's not just like one day. It's like probably a little bit every day, and a specific emphasis on it, has to happen every week.
Yeah, we're saying that, you don't have to train every day, obviously, right?
Totally, yeah, no, yeah.
But like if you're training anywhere from like 2 to 4 times, like chances, like one of those times, you're going to be taking a training max in something, probably. Whether or not that training max is a stimulating training max or retaining training max depends on if you are at the appropriate, if you have a developed neural network. If you don't have a neural network, if this marathon runner can't trap bar deadlift 200 pounds, the training maxes that we're taking is to try to get them to 200 pounds. Right. If they're at 200 pounds, we're just keeping it there, which means it's no longer a stimulating intensity.
Such as to say that 300 would not be worth pursuing because you're just not getting what you want out of it. You're just getting better at that thing, right?
Correct. But think about it this way. This is what's crazy, because if you look at absolute strength from a top down, bottom up again, is as you build more biology, you are going to get stronger.
You will, but that's not because we tried to, because
correct.
Because you're getting a better biological organism that
just
happens to be able to do that better, not because we became the trap bar gold medalist.
Yes, exactly. So from the neurological side, you can see that, listen, like the neurological training isn't going to be we don't need a lot, right? Because you're talking about force expression over a long duration of time. Yeah. So that's on the endurance spectrum, right? So what this person's going to need is tons of joint function, tons of reactive strength. Why? Efficiency of movement, right? So when you look at the type of training, you're going to start to go, well, where does all this force transmission occur? Well, you're going to see like plantar surface of the foot. You're going to see, so anybody that treats marathon runners knows that they all deal with the itises. I got plantar fasciitis. I got Achilles tendonitis. I got patella tendonitis. Okay, all that. Yeah. So to your point, when you said earlier, hey, isn't there going to be like indicators? Yeah, there's your indicators. Think about all those pathologies. That's all white connective tissue that it's not getting
supposed to. Yeah.
Yes. So it's already degrading. Yeah. So it's already degrading. And then when you go, well, what are you doing for reactive strength? They go, nothing. And you go, okay, well, like, listen, this is the lowest hanging fruit. Okay. So, and there's differences when you, as you know, like we know a lot about, like, for instance, like Westside uses a Louis when he discusses the 3-week pendulum wave. That comes from the Soviets. Yep. Because the Soviets figured out, like, hey, listen, you can't really push the nervous system in high level athletes for longer than 3 weeks. You need to deload. You need to get some delayed transformation, right? You can still do speed strength to a large degree, depending on the athlete, but
you're not maxing. Yeah, you're not gonna be able to. Your body won't keep up with it.
Okay, exactly. And so, like, that deload has to occur for the nervous system. With biological tissue, it's different. Okay, it's different. Explain it. Right? Connective tissue is different. It can handle more. It's funny. I'll tell you the story. So we have Mike Francois at the gym that I train at. He's a good friend of mine. Anybody that knows him, dude, this guy won the Arnold Classic. Phenomenal
Yeah,
bodybuilder.
yeah, yeah. Okay, I'm tracking on who you're talking about now. I'm gonna pull a picture up, but continue.
Dude, pull a picture up of this guy's back. This guy's back. He trained at Westside too. He trained
Did
briefly at
not know that.
Westside.
Yeah,
Yeah, he trained briefly at Westside with George Halbert. George told me, he said, listen, Mike, I'm not comparing myself to Mike Francois in any capacity
sure,
whatsoever.
sure.
But he told me, he's like, after training with Francois and training with you guys have the same thing where essentially like you guys can't compress, but he said that Francois would be training and he would go like the first
Oh,
rep.
I can see.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. Yeah, holy shit.
Yeah. So he would say how he didn't have the ability to compress. He would get better, and it'd be like the eighth rep, and he's like, George was like, I could see him growing like during the set. He's like, this
Yeah,
dude
yeah,
is
yeah.
okay.
Literally
So
seeing the visualization of the like pump like happen because that tissue's doing some like in the intensity of that compression at that point in time, that compression happening, right? Because it kind
yes,
of has to happen at a certain time. The compression happening at 20 minutes is different than it happening at 2 minutes, different than it happening at 1 minute versus 5 seconds, right?
exactly,
Yep.
exactly. And so in high end sports, you're trying to close the gap, so it's boom, boom,
Yeah.
right? Like speed kills, as they say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and one more thing, Francois. So Francois, after he won the Arnold Classic, he did a
Mm.
photo shoot. I believe it was in Flex magazine with Dorian Yates. I
Jesus.
mean, this dude,
Who's got the best back of all time, in my opinion. But
yeah. Oh no, for sure.
yeah.
The reason why I bring this up though is I've always had issues with my calves.
Yeah.
My calves. Listen, but listen, I'm making progress finally with
Yeah.
so
Thank God.
40 years into it. No, so what's funny is I'm at the gym and I'm talking to Francois's calves are crazy still to this
Yeah.
day,
Yeah.
right? And so it's funny, I'm talking to him and I'm like, and like I treated him and he helped me with nutrition back when I
Yeah.
competed in bodybuilding. And I remember he was telling me, he's like, yeah, he's like, sometimes you just have to do like ridiculous amount of volume for your calves because you're on them all day. Right. And it's
They're used to
funny,
it. Yep.
right?
Yep.
Well, it's the same thing with connective tissue, right? Like connective tissue, it's avascular, it's white tissue, it's not red tissue, it's not neural tissue, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like based off the law of specificity, it's a completely different tissue. Therefore, the frustrating part is it's like, oh, you know how to train the nervous system? Perfect. None of that translates to connective tissue. Why? Because we're talking about a completely different
Yeah.
system, right? And
Yep.
so to get back to this individual, the marathon individual that we're discussing, so now we're thinking like, if you think about it this way, um, so remember we were discussing load.
Yes.
Okay, so let's start to discuss load relative to tissue. So when that individual is running, the load is actually dynamic in the tissue.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so it's like boom, boom,
Yep.
boom, boom.
Yep.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
not enough time under tension to develop more tissue.
Right. Yep.
Okay. Okay. According to the consensus statement on isometrics, you need a 3 to 4 second isometric hold, which gives enough time under tension for all of the white tissue to be able to experience that force, let's say.
Mm-hmm. 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 Okay.
Okay. So
Yep.
immediately you're starting to think like I need to start to add static loading into all these connective tissue structures.
Yeah. Got you. Okay.
Now here's the thing. So you can go into HEMAs, you can go into PEMAs,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like oscillatory isometrics it marries both of them
Mm-hmm.
because if you think about it, that weight is oscillating And
Yeah.
as it oscillates, it goes from almost like a pressing to a holding to a pressing to a holding. So
Yeah,
it's an
because you
oscillate.
contract, like I don't know if you've seen the tsunami bar like science or whatever behind that specific one, but like when you go down and that thing like whips basically like 345 plates like they're gonna hit you in the shins, and then it whips back up and does that a few times. Like the amount of force being produced is like exponential in those moments where it's at that peak flex. Right? So you're
Yes.
saying that you're trying to basically scale a specific version of that depending on your loading parameter. What I think you mentioned 40% or whatever, but I'm sure there's different things going at 20 versus 60, right? That we can think about. And you are trying to make sure that the it's almost like applying metric in my mind, where if you're doing like 100th depth drop, like that momentary force that you experience there is so supra maximal to anything you can produce in a different way, and that's good because it's making that connective tissue do something it's not used to doing repeatedly.
Correct.
And that's what is I guess, the stimulus that forces the white tissue adaptation that is very
Yeah, because
unique to what you're doing.
correct. Because the white tissue, remember, go back to that neuromuscular lag time. Like, like your nervous system is lagging. So
Mm-hmm.
if that's the case, then force is going to first propagate through the white tissue. Your
Yep.
nervous system technically doesn't know there's force there unless you have white tissue, because that's what's going to generate the information flow that says, hey, there's mechanotransduction occurring here. Do you want to do something with it?
Yeah. Okay. I love that. Yeah. 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 And that's where they go to their practice, having this new, connective tissue. And I'll say this for like a lineman, they do X, Y, and Z drill, but now they're doing it with that connective tissue. And it's
Yeah.
that loop that is better lineman. But if to go back to the ultra marathon runner, if my skill practice is going and hitting 20 miles, well, then that's now like the sport specific thing. So I think, as such as to say, you're giving white tissue canvas when you do this. That is
Mm-hmm.
not unique to a sport until you go to practice.
Correct. Because when you go to practice, that's when you get the transfer of training effect.
Yeah, and that's neurological too, right? Like for obvious reasons, like the actual skill of timing, I'm thinking quarterback level here, like knowing exactly how to sling that thing at this angle around a defender, like blah blah blah. I can give a billion examples, but it's because you're able to fluidly do that, right? From a
It,
billion reps of actually throwing a football.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And so you can see there's essentially what you're also saying is like, then there's a parallel when it goes into transfer of training where there's a neurological side and once again a biological side.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, like, now you can see, that's why I'm saying, like, when you start to think about it that way, like, think about like a baseball player.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, like, listen, like, World Series is coming up. Like, I can look at all of these things through the lens of special strength. And as if an inside out version, not the Soviet version, because the
Mm-hmm.
Soviet version, they didn't like it was too, we didn't know enough at the time. I shouldn't say we, because obviously I wasn't there.
Yeah,
They didn't know enough, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
They like there wasn't enough evidence from other sciences to kind of converge. It's
Mm-hmm.
like if you think about like what we know about like neurophysiology
Mm-hmm.
now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we can take a lot of these gross uh, points of logic and we see how they transfer over, right?
Yeah.
So when you start to understand the difference between training and practice, you can see that there's a neurological side to it and there's a
Mm-hmm.
biological side to it, right? And then it's like, so then you can go, okay, well, Otani hits these home runs. Okay,
Yeah.
well, like, listen, like we can look at that as a special strength.
Mm-hmm.
And technically, if we want to know how to program optimally for it, you don't have a choice. You have to, because you have to know what are the neurological prerequisites, what are the
Mm-hmm.
biological prerequisites, and how do they have to interface and synergize with each other so that you can continue to be in a position where that emergent behavior just continues to occur.
I love that, dude. That's awesome. And maybe exploring another example. I mean, let's use Otani. Let's use a baseball pitcher. Like
Mm-hmm.
obviously. So I to summarize and maybe put a lid on the ultra marathon. Like you're saying that the difference here is probably the emphasis on one, which tissue, and two, I guess, like what that tissue has to do in the context of that sport. Now in baseball,
Correct.
we've got different contexts and such. So what are the changes you would make for that, that pitcher?
Yeah, and then we would also add on joint because we kind of just talked
Okay.
about the
Yep.
tissue capacity,
Yep.
right? But we would also say like, listen, we want the big toe to be able to go into maximal dorsiflexion. We want to
Yep.
make sure that we get opening side stretching in that tissue. Same thing in the ankle, same thing
Yep.
in the knee, same thing in the hip, right?
Yeah.
It's funny. I'll give you. I don't work with, for whatever reason, marathon runners don't come to me. So I don't, I don't have a lot of experience with marathon runners, but
Yeah.
one of my wife's clients, we did an assessment on her,
Yep.
and it's funny, dysfunctional hips, both hips dysfunctional.
Yeah.
So we just installed very specific joint function training. Okay,
Yep.
that training. So she just ran her marathon, Columbus
Yep.
Marathon, on Sunday.
Yep.
Horrible weather here, per the usual. You've been in
Yeah.
Columbus,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Never
So
good.
this time of year, yeah, it's not like where you're at, man. You're okay.
No.
Um, so anyway, she smokes her PR.
Yeah. Just,
Okay,
yeah. Destroys it, and just by addressing joint function.
just because now it's like, and I would always joke, it's like, yeah, like those hips are kind of important for running, right?
Shoulder.
So we
Yeah.
we would also layer that hip stuff in there as well,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
For baseball, baseball is a sport. I think one of my buddies is on this call. I think Alan Burr, AB, is on
Okay.
this call. I'm not sure. I think I randomly saw him on there. If he is,
Sweet.
I want
Yeah.
to.
Alan, welcome,
Uh,
dude. If you are here, if
yeah,
not, well.
yeah. But he's a baseball guy, and
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to do some work with him in baseball. And anyway, baseball is going to be, um, in my opinion, and I'll get your opinion on this, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
one of the things that, so Olin Kreutz, who played in the NFL for 14 years,
Mm-hmm.
so he's like all decade team, multi-decade team, right? This
Mm-hmm.
phenomenal offensive lineman. And we go through like film. We do like these film studies where we're trying to understand blocking as a special strength, so that
Mm-hmm.
then once we understand that it's a special strength, then we can kind of answer the questions that you're asking better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's crazy. So if you think about it, like he was blocking, like we have a clip of him blocking Vince Wilfork, who's like 340, right?
Yeah. 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 Big, like one of the biggest defensive tackles ever.
So Olin never played. He would enter camp at like 305, but he would always be like 285 to like 290-ish.
Yeah. Yeah. By the time he actually hit playing weight, like in season,
Yeah, but
which
he's
was very
blocking
rare
these.
back then too.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
technically considered like undersized.
Yeah. Like super small, 300 pounders are what like everybody talks about in the context of that.
Correct. But think about it, like he had such a large neural net because of the training that his grandfather would have him take max efforts, have him do cheat reps where he's using super maximal weights ever
Yeah.
since he was in high
Awesome.
school. So he told me that he got drafted. He only went to school for 2 years and a quarter
Yeah.
and went out at the age of 20. Well, he said that when he first entered into the league, he could cheat press 515. Okay, so that's a huge
Yeah.
neural network. So you
Yeah.
can see, to get back to baseball, and it's
Yep.
kind of what Louis Simmons. It's like you want this massive neural net so that you can
Yeah.
get these compressions where you're just like,
What
what
the
was that?
fuck? Yeah. 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 Yep. I hear you.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and part of the issue is, a lot of like the main method, which would be the maximal effort method, isn't really utilized and so realistically what you have is a bunch of nervous systems that haven't developed the neural network of absolute strength. They can't compress, they can't output force expression, right?
Yep.
So you're looking at a huge top down limiting constraint.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, if you look at Otani, right? Like it's interesting. Like obviously we don't know what his training is because we're not privy to that.
Sure.
But it's interesting. Like clearly his neural network is
Best
big.
pitcher, best. I mean, you just had the best game maybe in any sport ever.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
So it's
So
like, yeah, what you're talking about, like he's clearly got a neural network that is like making him three elite players in one.
correct. So then you're thinking from a programming standpoint, okay, like if the nervous system is outputting at this level,
Yeah.
what biology is do I think is going to explode? What joint is going to give way? What tissue is going to give way? And
Yeah.
now it's kind of like all hands on deck. Like,
Mhm.
listen, like we want to make sure that this nervous system. I like how the Soviets, when you read Medvedev and stuff like this, they would talk
Mhm.
about unleashing the athlete, right?
Yeah. I love that concept. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, like listen, I don't know if that's some sort of like translation from Russian to English, but
Fucking
that's what
awesome.
you want to do,
Yeah. Hell yeah,
right?
it
You
is.
don't
Yeah.
want
It's the whole point.
yeah, you don't want the nervous system to not be able to interface with something that it needs, right?
Mhm.
That's what you see, getting back to the NBA, that's what you saw like when it mattered the most in the playoffs,
Mhm.
right? The nervous systems were outpacing all of the biological tissue. And so we're forced to sit here and watch Achilles tendons systematically rupture.
Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
is that? Probably because they have an inaccurate definition of reactive strength, right?
Mhm.
And they're
Mhm.
not they're
Yeah, they're
not
missing something big, right? If that's still
yeah,
happening, it's like hey, we're missing something.
yeah. So that's kind of how you would do it, right? Is you would take an inventory, like you would know, like, hey, a bench presser is going to need more muscle tissue on the tricep, more muscle tissue in the front delt, more muscle tissue in the rotator cuffs, more
Mhm.
muscle tissue in the lats and the pecs, right? And so that kind of starts to tell you, like, okay, well, if it needs more muscle tissue, it also needs more connective tissue because now,
Yeah.
right? And so
Yep. Yeah,
now
100%.
right, and so that's what you kind of do with every athlete that you have is now we can kind of open it up and it gives us a lot of programming opportunities to be able to let's say train them at a higher level of specificity which positions the athlete to get real transfer of training, like
Yeah.
meaning like I trained this off season and now I'm coming to practice and I'm like I am in the position that I need to be in so that I'm unleashed.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So I guess I have a bigger conceptual question maybe to zoom out for a moment. You're talking about law specificity and obviously like we're not going to get an NFL lineman training like an ultra marathon runner, right? It's just not, it's the specificity is not there. But I'm curious about accommodation in this context and like how far do we need to stray, right? Like from just what you're probably claiming as like standard strength training, right? Like, and I guess I'm not asking this question great. I'm not going to because there's a lot of layers to it. When I think about accommodation, I'm thinking about how can we keep stimulus fresh so that the athlete is constantly forced to adapt, right? We don't get reach that point of diminishing returns and we get the capacity. Like that's why I love what Louis did with the rotating max efforts. You were always exposed to max effort, which at the end of the day is what powerlifting is all about. But obviously, like to the
Mm-hmm.
point, like we have to have specificity of the lifts that are going to move the three power lifts up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
in the context of that accommodation too, when we get sports where there's repetitive motions and clearly that are just predisposed to that element of accommodation, have you seen this kind of training allow athletes to circumnavigate around that a bit, or do they still need like high variety in that
Mm-hmm.
respect? So I don't know where you want to
Mm-hmm.
go with that. That was a very long explanation, but
No,
accommodation.
okay. So I love the question. I love it. So okay. So this goes back to it's funny. Dr. Shivers,
Hmm.
we had this conversation about like the biological law of accommodation.
Hmm.
And I remember he wrote an article, it's on Absolute, and it's called
Hmm.
Neurological Stagnation. And
Hmm.
he's telling me on a phone call, he's like, listen, uh, I don't think accommodation occurs neurologically. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, what do you mean? And then it's funny, I was traveling and so I read the first draft of this article and I'm in this hotel room. And I remember reading it and being like, holy fuck, man, this is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if you think about it, it's the biological law of specificity. But the neural net is technically it can stagnate. Okay. So
Yeah. Yeah.
let me give you an example. So you can think it all depends on what lens you're looking at it, but you can think that you're avoiding biological accommodation when you're technically driving it. Okay. So
Okay. Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
so
Yep.
so
Yep.
so to your point, so essentially let's maybe okay, so we want some level of, we want the tissue to accommodate to be able to handle some sort of load, effort, and intent so that it can output that at the level of competition, whether that's on a football field, a baseball diamond,
Yeah.
etc.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. And so we're okay with a degree of accommodation, right? But
Yes.
accommodation is different than stagnation. Okay, so let me give you a case in point. So you brought up the rotating the 3 week where it's like, okay, maybe you do like a pin press, then you do a
Mm-hmm.
board press, and then you do
Yep.
a football bar press.
Sure. Yep.
So you took 3 max efforts.
Yep.
Okay, so you're getting the neurological response.
Yes.
But if you think about it from a joint perspective, the joint is still mechanically doing the same thing. So the nervous
The
system,
same thing over. Yep. Yep. Yep.
okay, so what I'm trying to say is when you do that, you're technically not avoiding biological accommodation at the joint level, you're driving it. Because the
Even if we
joint,
switch grips, even if we switch all that stuff, you're saying.
yeah, because think about it, even if you switch grips, the kinematics at the joint are still the same. You're still taking a shoulder that's a rotational joint and you're
And
having
make
it
it.
do linear things.
I'm tracking. You're turning a rotational joint into a linear joint, and that is what you're accommodating to.
Correct.
Okay. Yep.
So the shoulder joint is actually accommodating to the lift unless you have joint specific training. That's why some of those lifters use gain access. That's why we run it in conjugation. So
Yeah.
that's an
Because you
easy
have to
way
do
for,
the press. You have to.
yeah, for sure.
You're a power lifter, right?
For sure.
But if you only ever do that, you are going to accommodate, and you're saying that to add in these layers of actually making the shoulder do shoulder shit is what's going to help you avoid accommodation.
Starve off accommodation.
Okay.
Okay. But here's the thing. This is I think the paradigm shift, okay, is the reason so if we agree that it's not technically starving off accommodation,
Yeah.
what it's doing is it's not letting the nervous system get bored and stagnate. So stagnation is different
Okay.
because it's like you know how like I eat a rather bland diet. Like
Same.
I've drank like I don't know, man. Like I woke up at like 4 a.m. because I got to get a bunch of work done. I've drank like 4 of these.
Yeah.
My nervous system has stagnated to drinking regular water.
Yeah. 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 Yep.
Okay, it's
100%.
this like and so I think a lot of what, but once again, like we get back to like, well, what did Lou know at the time that he came up with this? Louis knew of the biological law of accommodation, but that's for biology. Okay, like what about the neural network? Like, does a neural network accommodate? Like, you don't really hear about that, but you hear about them stagnating. They get bored. Why? Because it's the same thing over and over again. So you
Yeah.
have to, right? So think about it. Like, if you're not cultivating bottom up stuff, the nervous system is for sure going to stagnate, but still doing the
It's going to
same
get rid
thing.
of it too. It's going to have entropy. Like it's going to
Yes,
leak that stuff on top of it, which
correct,
that's a deadly game to play.
correct,
Okay.
correct. So, for instance, Otani, he stagnated. Okay, so think about it. His nervous system stagnated through the playoffs. So then
Mm-hmm.
what did he do? He took batting practice outside before that game we were talking about. When he
Mm-hmm.
took batting practice outside, that was a new stimulus. He hadn't done it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then what happens? Well, you know what happens. If you're Otani, you're pissed off because you're like, dude, like I'm not outputting how I should. I'm letting myself down. I'm letting my team down. So now the intent starts to be like, I'm going to start to crush these balls. Like I want to send these balls out of here. Now the
Yeah.
nervous system is practicing at the edge, right? If we look at it from a training standpoint, that would be a special strength of like let's say, you know, dynamic. I'm just making shit up now,
Sure.
but like whatever baseball wants to call that, that's a special strength that's now we're getting the emergent behavior. And then
Yeah.
and so now his nervous system went from stagnating to humming, and now you see, hey, well, now it's fully lit up when he goes to pitch. It's fully lit up when he goes to hit. Okay, so now you went from a stagnated neural net into one that's humming going into the World Series. That's
Yeah.
exactly what you
That's a
want.
good thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Okay. That's beautiful. So then
Yeah.
I
Well,
guess
that's
then
Shivers. That's Shivers. That's not me. I'm just
yeah,
that's why you should have him on
I
because
should.
I'm doing like the layman's interpretation of it.
Sure. Well, I mean that's that, but these are great concepts to understand, right? Because immediately think of all that unlocks for a coach from a programming perspective, right? And how simple it can be, just like a few sets of cars, right? Can now like maybe get this thing steamrolling in another direction and unlock, all these other potential options there, right? So I'm no, I love that. I guess what else do you kind of have on that concept of accommodation there that we should be considering?
So when you start to think of a combination like that,
Hmm.
so we have like how we think about programming at Absolute
Hmm.
is we think that there's a point A, which is your initial assessment. So
Yep.
in the learning module, point A consists of training history, performance history, and training history is almost also treatment history. So now we're
Okay.
starting to look like, hey, are the clinical staffs cultivating joint function and reactive strength? If no, we need to know that so that the strength side can start to pick up those pieces, and maybe they have to train for all of those elements, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you got treatment training history, you got performance history, right? So level of adaptation, level of competition, and then you got medical history, and then you have FRA, which is a functional range assessment. So that's the course that Dr. Shivers teaches.
Yes.
It's and that's what's going to assess, like, let's say joint function, etc. So you have point A. Point A is like all these feedback loops, and then you have this point B. Well, what is point B? It's the optimal physical state that you want to get to. So you want this athlete to get to this point, and the programming is the roadmap that's going to get you there. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Totally. Yeah.
Right?
100%. Yep.
Okay. So let me explain it to you this way because you'll be able to personally relate to this. So if you start to think about it from that perspective and put yourself in Louis Simmons' shoes.
Hmm.
So so the point that we want is we want there to be this like internal state where they have absolute strength, speed strength, joint function, and reactive strength. So those are the four things that the absolute conjugate strategy trains on a weekly basis.
Mm.
Those four things. Okay. Well, when you look at it from like, let's say the Soviets' perspective, or let's say Louis' perspective, their point B is a lift.
Yes. Yes. Yep. Yep.
So
Very
that's
simple
why
to
Lou,
understand, right? Like it's more weight on the bar.
yeah, so that's why Louis would have all the calculations like, I need this person to get this lift to here, and then they're in a position to now hit this record. That's
Yes.
why George was like, listen, he can hit 600 pounds. He just
Yes.
needs to train more specifically.
Yeah.
You see
Yeah.
what,
Yes.
you see what I'm
Absolutely.
saying?
Hmm.
But unfortunately, like that's the only feedback loop. So it's just like this external thing. And then what ends up happening is you accommodate to that thing.
Yeah.
So you accommodate to the left.
Hmm. Hmm.
And as you
Yep.
accommodate to the left, guess what happens? It drives like that biological accommodation drives stagnation. And now you're stagnating and accommodating, and now you've hit a plateau, which
Yeah.
happened first internally and then secondarily at the lift level, right?
Hmm.
Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's such as to say that like when we're thinking about hypertrophy in the context of red and white tissue, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
there is a degree of more that you need. Now, the ratio between those two things probably depends on the sport, probably depends on like, the just the person's like, I don't know, what their desired outcome is, but you're going to need more. Like there's no 190-pound offensive lineman. You have to get red muscle tissue to a certain level. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, but if you don't have the white tissue to keep up with that from a hypertrophy of it standpoint, like great, but you're gonna be on you're gonna be on the IR a lot.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Okay.
For sure. 100%. So yeah, so that's kind of, I don't know if that answers the question, but
Yeah.
that's kind of like the art and science of programming kind of in a nutshell of
Hmm.
like just like our goal for programming is to unleash the athlete, that
Hmm.
learning module is to unleash the programmer,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
that then it's like the problems of 2025, not the
Hmm.
problems that were solved in 1990 with like neurological scaling.
Yeah.
Like we start to solve today's problems, not
Yeah.
yesterday's problems, right?
That have already been solved largely too.
Exactly.
Like we know how to do that. It's not hard. Um,
Exactly.
in that respect. Okay, gotcha. Now, I guess you know, I'm trying to think a question just popped in my head. I lost it for a second, but it has to do, I guess, with problems of the future, I guess. Like let's say we nail this biological element, right? We've got
Mm-hmm.
everybody's white tissues humming, the neurological outputs all there, the neural nets engaged, things are meshed. Like, what's the next stone to uncover there? Because that feels like it unpacks a lot, but I gotta imagine there's more layers to this, right?
Yeah. So I remember Louis Simmons would always say, he would always quote Rodney Piper.
Hmm.
As soon as you have all the answers, I just change all the questions.
Yeah,
Is that like
perfect.
that's the right? Like so it's like I feel like that bit of logic functions in what we're trying to do as strength programmers, right?
Hmm.
So so where does this go from here, right? Like
Hmm.
one, I'm like highly optimistic. I'm probably overly optimistic.
Sure.
Um and so I think I think I mean if I speak honestly, I feel like we've really solved the reactive strength problem to a large degree
Yeah.
because we've solved it at our level, right? Like obviously we don't work for different organizations, so like we haven't solved it at that scale. But I can tell you at like our scale, like we don't have these reactive strength problems, and if we
Yeah.
do, we can so rapidly. I'll give you a case in point. We had an MCL.
Okay.
I can't discuss the specifics of the individual.
Yeah.
It's on lineman special strength. So Olin, so it's inevitable that the MCL, from what Olin tells me, it's inevitable for the MCL to give way because when you're either a center or a guard, because
Yeah.
somebody is gonna, and we actually have a video. We have videos. We went through. He had 3 MCLs himself.
Right, because someone's always getting like checked into your freaking knee. Like
Yeah,
which
exactly.
is not like a non-contact injury. That's like about as fucking close to a car crash as it probably gets in sports. Is
Yeah.
that lineman going through that?
So the one injury that Olin walked us through was
Mhm.
he's engaged in blocking. It's a run play. Michael Strahan is coming down the line. He
Mhm.
slips off the running back,
Yeah.
and as Olin's engaged, his foot's in the ground, piles right into his knee. MCL
Boom.
explodes.
Yeah.
Okay, that same mechanism of injury happened. Okay, now when Olin played, he said it took him essentially 4 weeks to get back to return to performance.
Hmm.
Okay, this kid 10 days.
Mm.
Okay, so
Wonder
when
over
I
time.
say that,
Yeah.
like, right, I mean, we go through like not the details of it because this kid's
Yeah.
still playing and stuff, right?
Yeah.
And we don't really want people to know who it is, obviously. And so
Sure. Sure. Sure.
um but the reason why I say that is like, like that's the level of specificity where it's like we're able to essentially go. And the other thing that was interesting too, because in lineman special strength, the MCL is systematically trained every week. What was interesting is the MRI report was it was a grade 2. So it was, so
So you didn't
grade
fully
1,
rupture it.
grade,
Yeah.
right. It wasn't a full rupture, but it was And but there was a note from the radiologist that said, listen, there's a redundancy of white tissue here. They actually made the comment of how much white tissue was on the knee, right? So we're
Yeah.
thinking, well, maybe all of that training for years in high school and college, it's cultivated so much white tissue that what maybe would have been a grade 3 is now a grade 2. And now because
And
he
that's a
knows,
massive difference. That's a massive
yes,
difference. Yep.
correct. And now that he knows how to train it, because for 8 years he's been training it, right? Then it immediately goes into, okay, we just modulate like the maximums. And then guess what? 10 days later, he's playing, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay, so
Wow.
to kind of get back to the point, like, um, I think that in regards to we have a lot of this stuff. I think like our challenge at absolute at lineman special strength is essentially like being able to like we have to be able to educate people, programmers, so that they can do this, right? And
Yeah.
then because I think once that starts to get installed and reactive strength starts to become something that the clinical staff can treat, the strength staff can train. Now we're
Yep.
bringing the staffs together. They're working together to
Yeah.
figure out this really complex special strength. Same thing with joint function. I think injury rates, in theory, should go down, right? So, like, obviously, there's so much violence at the level of competition that it would
Hmm.
only escalate, meaning like injuries aren't going to go away, but maybe
Yeah.
we can take level grade 3s, make them to grade 2s, and then
Yeah.
get
Severity
back
reduces, right?
correct. So
Yeah.
I think that's where you can gain significant advantage if you think about it. Let's say that you're an NFL team and you understand how to train reactive strength. Well, now that you look at these reactive strength injuries, this is a massive leverage point. Like if
Yeah.
you
That's
can get
that's
individual
millions of dollars you're saving. Millions.
correct. Well, what's crazy is last year we did how much dead money is in reactive strength in the
Okay.
NFL.
Yeah. Yeah. How
I
much?
I'd have to go back. Like I remember thinking like it's like hundreds of is it almost $1 billion? It's crazy.
I would believe you. Yeah. I would believe you if it was.
Yeah, because I think we kind of joked around it was $1 billion problem,
Yeah.
right? But then what we ended up doing was we used Chat GPT to start to add up all the, hey,
Yeah.
can you search for all these injuries, and then added it up, and we're like, holy shit, this thing's almost $1 billion,
Yeah.
right? Of just
Yeah.
dead money, right? So yeah, I mean,
Unreal.
I think the future is bright, and I think that yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. I really like the question about
Hmm.
like that forward thinking,
Hmm.
uh, because I think that once you increase, like if you think about it even briefly, if you start to increase the bottom up stuff of special strength and the top down, the emergences are going to go crazy,
Well,
right?
you'll just have better athletes too at the end of the day, right? I mean, we're not even just talking injury history. We're gonna have more guys that can do like Travis Hunter, Otani level, like just insane what we're gonna be seeing at all these higher levels of
Correct.
of just the
Correct.
feats they can achieve off of that going well. Because obviously the dark side of it is injuries and all that, but the beautiful bright side is like you get three Otanis on one team and you're like, this is the new evil empire of X League, and it sounds like it can really create that too,
Yeah.
which
Yeah,
is
I think it's a huge advantage, I think. Yeah.
mhm.
So yeah, and that's a cool question. I like it.
Sweet, man. Yeah, well, I guess the next question I have to kind of go in the weeds a little bit on, adaptation, we get something like Wolf's Law with bone structure, and kind of hitting the bone matrix. I guess I'm curious because you're talking a lot about submaximal loads and being able to leverage those. And this is probably just me not knowing the underlying science, but there's a certain importance to just like in my mind, like something like a sumo deadlift, or like where your body's just outputting the most amount of weight it can on a given lift, right? And that,
Hmm.
yeah, for the bone matrix, for the hormonal response that provides and such. And I guess, like, is there any degree of programming that we have to consider? And maybe it's just that retaining the training max element, as long as you've got that stuff kind of in place, that matters with the bone element of this.
Hmm. That's a great point. That's a great point. So yeah, so essentially what you're saying is bone is white connective tissue.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be an element of bottom up reactive strength.
Mm-hmm.
And and in regards to maximal loading, there that is a high stimulus. And I'll give you a specific example where I thought the same thing that you thought.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of gruesome, but I remember thinking, remember when Conor McGregor got
Yes, dude, I use this example all the time because he was trained with Ido Portal. He stopped lifting external loads basically to train in that system, and then crack 2 years later, entropy had occurred at this rate, and boom, he wraps his leg around I forget, Dustin Poirier maybe, but yes, dude,
yes,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that's it.
I remember I
Yes,
used this
yes.
same example, dude. Maybe we heard it the same place, but yeah. Yep.
Okay. What's crazy is listen, I've not heard you say that. And you haven't heard me say this either. So like
Yeah.
listen.
Nope.
Okay, so I remember watching that fight. I remember watching that fight live and I remember thinking, listen, this is a reactive strength injury because
Mm-hmm.
it's a bottom up issue. So there's a biological
Yep.
injury. Nervous
Yep.
system was able to output whatever magnitude of force. Bone
Yep.
tissue couldn't transmit it. Bone tissue yielded,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Okay, so to your point, I remember thinking, yeah, he was for sure not taking training maxes because there is going to be an element. Okay, so this is worth going over. So in regards to connective tissue, there's a difference between training for more connective tissue and for training connective tissue to behave in a certain way.
Okay. Yeah. Unpack that.
Okay, so if you think about it, like the 1 rep max
Yeah.
isn't probably, I mean, you know what? Now that I think about it, you know what? Now that I think of it, this is a phenomenal question. So let's say that the training max, let's say that he does a trap bar deadlift and it takes him 6 seconds to get it up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Let, let's
Yep.
let's just say that it's over 4 seconds.
Sure.
From a bone structure standpoint, that should be enough because you've met enough time under tension under the
Mm-hmm.
skeletal structure to then
Mm-hmm.
essentially be able to scale up more bone tissue.
Right. And another question I have is, do we need to do that at so many odd angles, or is just the trap bar deadlift enough there? Right. So I'm saying, like, is it worth it to then go do the safety bar box squat as well? Is it worth it to go do the, uh, good morning, like max out there? Like how much variety do we need of that? And then how much variety do we also then need in the using OIMAs and such? You know what I mean?
Yeah, like listen, man, these are great questions, and honestly, I haven't thought about it enough to to be able to tell you like specifically.
Which is
But
a
what
totally
you're,
fine answer, man. I'm just
yeah,
trying. My brain's firing.
yeah,
So,
but if we keep going with what you're saying, right?
yep,
Like it makes sense because think of like I immediately thought the same thing. As soon as
yeah,
he shattered his leg, I saw
yep,
Anderson Silva do it, and I
yep,
remember
yep.
thinking, I know for sure that guy's not taking training maxes.
Fuck no. Yeah, no.
Okay. As soon
Yep,
as I saw Connor do it, I was like, there's no way this dude's taking training maxes
yep.
because think about it, his nervous system was able to output so much
His bone,
that
his
it
shin bone,
yeah,
which is like one of the
right.
most load bearing things in the goddamn body. Like
Yeah,
how did that happen? Yeah.
yeah, for
Yep.
sure. So when you start to think about it, because now we're talking about and so to get back to it, so in regards to like cultivating like more tissue, you need that time under tension.
Mm-hmm.
But to cultivate tissue behaviors, you just need the behavior. So maybe you just need reactivity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you just need it to react. So the oscillating isometric is just getting a bunch of reactions, right?
Mm-hmm.
But those reactions probably aren't going to convert to bone matrix.
Right. Right.
What's going to convert to bone matrix is just like think about astronauts, right? When
Yeah.
they're removed, right? And so if you think about it, like so this is an interesting thought experiment, but we should go with this. This is probably what happened in Connor's case.
Mm-hmm.
In Connor's case, at some point he scaled up his neurology.
Yeah.
So he was probably
Yep.
taking at least, let's say, 2 to 3s, maybe some 4 to 7s.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he
Mm-hmm.
wasn't doing true max effort work because, Louis says in all of his books, it's seldomly used. People think
Yep.
that it's like super dangerous to get your nervous system to
One of
maximally
the
output.
least dangerous ways to do it. Yep.
Yeah, in a training setting, yet, they're like, listen, use your head as a hitting mechanism to run into this guy as hard as you can. It
Yeah. Yeah.
makes no sense. But if
Yep.
you think about it, probably what happened is at some point he was utilizing let's say submax efforts or heavy efforts, and those heavy efforts were building up his neurology while simultaneously leading to more bone matrix. Then when he removes it, the neurology stays, it
Yes.
entrophies just a little bit, but the bone tissue rapidly degrades.
Yes.
This is what I think happened in the NBA. When I
Hmm.
say I, it's myself and Dr. Shivers.
Yeah.
So this is what we think happened. What we think happened is they were using RSI to handle loading. So RSI is going to be predominantly neurological in nature. So when they would see a drop in RSI, they would rest players. Well, and then once RSI would go up higher, it shows the nervous system's recovered. But the problem is it unloaded the connective tissue, right? So like
Hmm.
you don't need to like the deload for, in other words, the deload for nervous system is not the same thing as deload for connective tissue. The deload for connective tissue, if you look at literature that like people like Keith Barr are proposing, the
Hmm.
deload may be just 6 hours. Whereas nervous system is going to be 24, 48, 72, right? A lot of times Soviets are
Longer.
saying,
Yeah. Longer time window there.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. So probably what ended up happening was his neurology got scaled up so that there's it's asymmetry. His nervous system is like this, but his bone matrix is compressing down. And
Hmm.
then at
Hmm.
the moment of impact, when that bone tissue has to stress stiffen, it just essentially turns
Boom.
into
Yeah.
jelly.
Yeah. Shit. Okay. Got it. Got
Yeah.
it. Okay. Yeah, that's the example I always use of that of like, hey, like you gotta fucking put some weight on like your body at some point because you can have all this output, but if that bone can't handle it, you're ending up in the same place in that respect. And I like think, it's white connective tissue just the same way that, tendons, ligaments, all of those things are too.
It
So,
is. It's just a different composition of
mhm,
that matrix.
mhm,
And see, so let's just finish this so that you can see this as a reactive strength injury. So think about it. At the moment of impact, when the bone tissue was supposed to react and stress stiffen and transmit the force,
mhm.
the leg kept going. It just yielded. So
Yielded. Yep.
that white bony tissue turned into jelly, and that
Textbook.
lower leg just kept wrapping around.
Yeah, textbook reactive strength injury.
Yeah.
Got it. Because that's like the one injury I don't see talked about a lot. I'm like, obviously, all soft tissue injuries are like what everybody's obsessed with, but I'm like, what about a motherfucker going out there and just like snapping his leg? Like, that's actually a pretty shitty one too, you know? Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, okay. Okay. That
Yeah.
makes sense, dude.
And
Yeah.
to your point, like that bone has been selected as like the main weight bearing bone of the lower extremity.
Yeah.
So it's not like, what I mean? It's not like you broke something in your wrist, right?
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
like you broke
It's
your
hard to
tibia.
fucking do, man. Yeah, that's like it's not easy to do that. Yeah. You gotta like
Yeah.
fuck your shit up somehow. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, which means that there was a significant unloading process that occurred in his fight camp. Like he wasn't like that bony matrix, right? Which is, I think, that's why it's the same thing that I think happened in the NBA,
Hmm.
right? The reason why we saw systematic Achilles tendon ruptures, like
Hmm.
it's not like it was like one or the other. It's like basic change of direction is probably because of an incomplete definition of reactive strength, which then leads to essentially incomplete programming strategies where then you have connective tissue that's not ready at the highest levels of output, which is what the finals are.
Yes. Yep. That's a crazy way to think about it, dude. But that is ultimately, I mean, I think you've more than proven your definition speaks for itself, stands on its own 2 feet here. I think just to kind of transition us, I want to get you to answer some of there's a lot of questions that came in.
Okay.
And so want to get, people, the answers that they want, and such, and kind of dive into that. Before I do, is there anything else, kind of that you feel like you want to tie a bow on? There's just so much we talked about, dude. That was a badass conversation.
No, man, I just appreciate you. I appreciate the conversation. And I think it's kind of, it's funny. it's funny that when we both saw Conor
Yeah.
McGregor, we both. I mean, like, yeah, that's
I
cool.
feel like did that happen over I feel like I was bored over COVID or something and was like, I'm gonna watch the fights tonight. And then I was like, I like literally remember like I think having a notebook like to be like, what do I see tonight that I can just fuck around with mentally about training? And it was that, and I was like, that's a good thing to think through. Why did that happen?
I think you're right because during COVID, UFC was still full bore.
Oh, that was like one of the only things we had
Yeah,
at the time.
exactly.
Yeah, man. Yeah, nope, 100%. Cool. Well, first question here. Has velocity-based training improved your performance, connective tissue strength, neuromuscular function, or impulse generation? And did it affect your muscle size or definition?
Okay. So dynamic effort is a method that originates from the Soviet Union, right?
Mhm.
So it's like one of the original four methods that Zatsiorsky, Medvedev, Verbersky, they all write about.
Mhm.
And Zatsiorsky discusses it as it's predominantly neurological in nature, right?
Yes.
Meaning like like it's so I'll say this. I'll say this because I remember so my training partner, did you ever meet Seth Shaw?
Yeah, I trained with him. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. I had him put me through a session just because I was like, I want to see how you're doing it. Like,
Okay, yeah.
I
So
fucking cooked my lats, dude.
yeah.
Yep.
So we would when the nervous system would start to stagnate in bodybuilding training, we
Hmm.
would do dynamic effort.
Nice.
Okay, because you
Full.
would
You're talking full speed, full bore, like speed strength training.
well, we would do it to keep it a little bit more safe. We would do it on the hammer strength machine. So
Okay.
we would hook it up on the hammer strength machine, and what we would do to try to make it a stimulus of muscle building, because like all those sports scientists and coaches from the Soviet Union, they say that it's going to be neurological in nature, meaning like
Hmm.
the nervous system is trying to output and express force at like higher and higher rates or the highest
Hmm.
attainable speed, right? So it's more of a
Yep.
nervous system organizing the biology to be able to output at the highest attainable speed. So what we would do is we would do just volume of it. So
Mm.
we would know when to do it because essentially, we would train, we would do almost like a like Mike Menser, Dorian Yates style of volume, where it's like, okay, hey, like
You're
this is
going
going to be
one,
our
two,
ghost.
all out sets, right? And it's like you better be like sneezing your brain out of your nose after this. Like,
Yeah.
yep.
And what I learned with George Halbert is I remember George told me, he's like, we were smoking cigars. I'll never forget. He's telling me this. And dude, anytime I talk to George, he like blows my mind, right? I'm like, dude,
Yeah.
this guy is so crazy smart that you're like,
Yep.
there's levels to this, and this guy's like way up here, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But I'll never forget, he was like, if you think about it, he's like, you're strong enough, you're just not fast enough. And I'm
Hmm.
like,
Hmm.
right, which gets into the speed barrier, like
Yeah.
all this other
Yeah. We
stuff,
could talk for
right?
2 hours just about that, man. Yep.
Yeah, but I would see that speed barrier pop up. So we would be doing heavy effort. So we'd be trying to get a 4 to 7 on an incline press, and maybe on that fifth rep, you would see it just slow down, where it's like he like the nervous system was just stagnating at this speed, right? And so as soon as that would happen, it's like, you would do your forced repetitions and get whatever you can for the mechanical loading. Then that next week we would be like, listen, we're just doing dynamic effort. And then what we would do, because it was bodybuilding, is we would just do more volume with it,
Okay. So
right?
volume how? Like more sets, more reps? Like what do you mean?
So think about it. For like West Side, it wouldn't be unusual for them to do like 9 sets, let's say
Yep.
10 sets, right?
Hmm.
Maybe 10 sets of 2, 9 sets of 3, whatever, right?
Hmm.
We would do that, which for us is a lot of volume.
Yes.
Because think about it. Remember, I just told you that we would
You're
do
doing
one set.
Yates style. It's only 8,
Yeah.
right? Yep.
And so we would do one set, and now we're going to do 9 sets.
It's
So
completely
that's a
different.
Yeah, but that stimulus for us, because we were so untrained in
Yeah.
velocity based training, would actually give us a crazy pump.
And it's probably because you're talking about compression, right? You're
Yeah.
reaching compression through a different means. And likely
Yes.
with that, end state of those 9x3, you are reaching that tissue damage. It's just at rep 27 because of speed and short rest, I imagine, as opposed to on just eight of,
Mhm.
like a top set in that respect.
Yeah.
So it does achieve the same end state, but through a
Correct.
completely different pathway, which you're saying keeps the nervous system fresh and avoids accommodation.
Correct. Stagnation.
Stagnation. Sorry.
Well,
Yes. Yeah.
yes.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, because think about it. Just to add one more layer. If
Yep.
you're doing 8 reps and now you're doing 20 something, that's a huge increase in volume. So
Massive.
that's a
Yeah.
huge stimulating input for a bodybuilder,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? And then what would inevitably always happen is then whatever was stagnated on the week prior to that, then we would be able to blow through it, because then you would essentially be able to just go right through that initial sticking point,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the things that I learned from George,
Yep.
right? Is I remember when we moved to, because when I first started training with George, I wasn't at Westside. We were at a different facility. And
Mm-hmm.
then because George was playing around with different things and kind of just wanted to do his own thing. And then I remember then after I met Louis and then we went there, I remember I remember thinking, holy shit. And I remember seeing this with Olin and a lot of NFL guys, and is how fast the nervous system can stagnate. So George, we would never, whatever, if we're going to do 10x2, whatever load is on that bar, the next set, it's not. It's different. It would change, like, so it may be like one band, it may be two band,
How
right?
the fuck did he
Because,
figure this out, man? Like,
dude, because I'll tell you why. Because his nervous system was so highly trained that it would get bored intraset. He would do, if he did 3 reps, seriously.
yeah, I was like,
It, it, and I'll tell you another story, which is crazy. So when I was training so Drex would always train with us. He
yeah,
would train with us, but then he would always lift us. George loved the way that he
hands
lifted
up.
out.
Yeah,
Okay.
yep.
And I'll never forget, I was talking to Drex. It was, dude, I would get anxiety because I'd be like, dude, this is crazy. This is so crazy that this dude can move a barbell this fast. It, like,
Yeah,
you had to be there.
yeah,
It's fucking
yeah,
crazy, man. Like, it's
yeah.
so, because then you try to do it and you're like, this is like, dude, I'm
I'm
years
not doing
away
that
from this.
shit. Yeah. No way. No way. Yep.
But
Yep.
he told me, this is crazy. So Drex told me that George was so violent with a barbell that he actually tore his ACL bench pressing. And Drex said he grabbed the barbell because that's how much force he was putting through the ground, right?
I never
So
heard this story. That's crazy.
yeah, because he said that it sounded like celery breaking or a broomstick breaking, and so he grabbed the bar, and George was like, "Oh, it kind of like messed my knee up." He's like, "That wasn't your pec?" He was like, "I thought it was his pec tendon, right, or his
Yeah, just
tricep tendon."
broke
He's like,
rupture. No,
"Yeah,
ACL.
no,
What the fuck?
yeah." And so the
It's
point of the
awesome.
story is,
Yeah.
once the nervous system sees that much training, if you think about the volume of training that George had,
Oh my
it's
God.
like his nervous system's like, I'm bored already, and it's
Yeah.
already stagnating and not giving the output that you want,
My God. And
right?
that's like, I mean, but that's the shit that's the shit you're thinking about with someone that elite, right? And
Yeah,
you have to be that elite to ever even think to start to unravel those problems.
correct.
You have to show up to the gym 4 or 5 days a week for decades to get to that fucking point, not fucking miss. And that
Exactly.
is a crazy problem to have, and what a fucking wild problem to solve. That is so cool.
But what's crazy, this is what's crazy too, is I remember Louis would tell me, hey, whatever works for NASCAR, you probably heard this, will scale down to the Honda Civic, right? But whatever the Honda Civic doesn't scale.
This is
And
not
so
skill in NASCAR, baby. No way.
yeah.
Yep.
And so I remember thinking like, well, if this is working for George, I'm probably, Ola and I are probably seeing a lot of the same thing in regards to these NFL players. And then
Mm-hmm.
that's when we started changing the load, because at that point in time, like if we're training their nervous system 3, 4 times a week for years on end, it just gets bored,
Yeah.
right? So you have to figure out ways to adjust the load intra set, like from set to set, so that you're
Mm-hmm.
starving off that stagnation and you're still getting this output.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That's such a yeah, and that yeah. But I think that that's so important for even like youth athletes, right? To incorporate a little bit of that into their training, even if it's just the psychological buy-in for them, right? But it's, it keeps it guessing. And ultimately, that's what a opposing team's offense or defense is trying to make you do. It's trying to make you
Mm-hmm.
guess. It's trying to disorganize you neurologically, make you see something you haven't seen before. If you've fucking seen everything, like in
Mm-hmm.
practice and in the weight room, like it's
Mm-hmm.
going to be really hard to beat you. And if they do find that
Mm-hmm.
one, you're probably so good at that point that like it won't get you again.
Yeah, yeah, for
So,
sure.
and
That's a great
that's
point.
unleashing the athlete, right? Like, to
Mm-hmm.
that point earlier. So, okay, I love that. Next question.
Mm-hmm.
If you could erase one misconception in the performance world, what would it be and why does it still persist? That's a good one.
Oh man, these are I like these questions because yeah, they're way outside of what I think. I think I think the one misconception that is that I think I think from an evolutionary standpoint, we have to accept that we are at the infancy, like we're just at the beginning of this. Okay, like I think that a lot of people think that they have all this stuff figured out,
Hmm.
and maybe whatever they were doing in like 2000 they're still doing, and maybe it's justified to a
Well,
degree depending
what
on it.
level do they have it figured out though? Is what I always ask with that, right? Like
Hmm.
for who? Because if it's not with like you're saying, the NASCAR, the top of the top are having these problems. Most Gen Pop people do not have these problems.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So continue.
Yeah, and so if you think about it, like when you look at like the evolution of strength and strength training, right?
Hmm.
Like this science emerged, realistically, it was forged through the Soviet Union in the 50s all the way until their collapse.
Hmm.
I think in the West, obviously I'm biased, having treated Louis for so long, right? I
Yeah.
remember the second time that I was at Westside, he's saying all this stuff, man. I'm like, dude, I have no idea what this guy's talking about. And then I remember,
Like
he
the boss
walks down and
sometimes.
yeah, he walks down and he hands me this book. He's like, "Did you not have this book in school?" And I'm like, "No, what is this book?" It was the second edition of the Science and Practice of Strength Training,
Yeah. Yep.
right? And I remember
100%.
going like, "This guy sees everything. Like, I haven't learned anything that this guy is talking about."
Yeah.
Right? And so the reason why I bring that up is because I think that when you start to like look at strength and strength training, like
Hmm.
I'll give you a case in point. One of the things that we're wrestling with at Absolute is like you have clinicians and you have coaches, right? But technically, everybody organizes under programming. So that's
Hmm.
why our learning module is the art and science of programming, because that's what actually unites everybody to start to solve these problems.
Yes.
Okay. But listen, like a programmer, a strength programmer, like this is all new terms. Like think about bridge. Think about how new bridge is. Like
Yeah.
bridge is there to try to bridge the gap to. I mean, I don't know if
Of
that's why,
course. Yeah. It's pretty spot on. Yep.
but if you think about it, right? Like so we're in a new paradigm where it's like, listen, like if I'm in the clinical setting, I got to work with strength, and if I'm in the strength setting, I got to work with clinical. Why? Because these special strengths are now so complex that you
Hmm.
can't fully, like you need, it's like it's the same thing. You would need strength and clinical to then give you like what you need, right? And so I think that one of the things that we have to understand is like when you start to, it's like the same thing. We do a deep dive on special strength and like
Hmm.
what the Soviets version of it, right? So if you think about it, like the Soviets came up with special strength. If it wasn't for Louis adopting much Soviet and Bulgarian stuff, that stuff would have all died. But the
Yeah.
problem is
Yep.
he didn't advance the concept of special strength in a manner where it unleashes programmers. It's just like this is what this is the definition in the book. Well, the
Yeah.
definition in the book doesn't tell you what I need to do as a programmer, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I think that like the thing that I would say is like, listen, we're at the edge of like we have to continue to it's our job collectively to start to solve, like Louis solved the neurological problem at Westside.
Mhm.
It's our job to start to solve like the more of the biological components, so that then we have this more of this symmetry between the biology and the neurology from a special strength standpoint. And then we're in a new paradigm. And to your point, like, what is that going to look like? Fuck if we know. We don't
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But we know as soon as we solve the biological problem, the nervous system is going to continue to scale, right? So
Yeah.
we're for
Yeah.
sure going to have more problems. I just have no idea what those problems are.
What those are gonna be. Yeah, because we haven't solved this one yet. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Beautiful.
So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, 100%. So two left here that we'll dive into. First one, what do you think separates a good coach from a great coach?
Oh, that's good. That's good. Man, these are good questions.
Hmm.
Yeah, whoever's writing these questions,
We have we
man,
have
these
stellar
are
we have stellar attendees, man. They every
yeah.
time we do an episode, I'm like amazed by what they ask. So
Yeah, I think a good coach, what separates a good coach from a great coach, man, honestly, I'm just gonna ramble because I don't
Mhm.
know. But I'll tell you, I think that you have to I think there's a level. One of the things that I've learned with working with Olin Kreutz, with
Mhm.
working with Louis Simmons, is is if you think about it, the athlete there's different. There's a guy's name's Howard Gardner, and he
Mhm.
came up with all
Mhm.
these different types of intelligences.
Yep.
Okay, and one of the intelligences is kinesthetic intelligence.
Mhm.
Okay. And one of the things, it's funny, you know, all the athletes that I've worked with, I've treated at Westside Barbell, all the like Louis Simmons, Olin, like they've been such a huge feedback loop to make me better as a coach. And
Mhm.
I remember having this conversation with Dave Tate because I can't remember the guy that Louis said, but essentially like Louis was in his 40s because people don't. I think people take it for granted. Like Louis was a competitive powerlifter and a coach. He did
Mhm.
them both.
It's
Like a lot
huge.
of people just categorize him as a coach, like he didn't have this, you know,
Badass
phenomenal,
career, yeah.
right? Like people just, I don't, maybe he was such a great coach
Mhm.
that it overshadowed his own career as a powerlifter,
Yeah,
right?
which
But
was
it's like,
great. Incredible. Yeah.
right, and so I think what makes a great coach is the ability to be able to connect with the athlete, to be able to educate the athlete, but to be able to have the athlete educate you. So
Mm.
Louis told me, one of the things that stood out that Louis told me is he said that like he may have been in his 50s, but somebody challenged him to like a bench press. Oh, you know, you're old, you're washed up, you can't do this anymore. And so they essentially, you know, everything was driven by competition. And so what ended up happening is Louis went and essentially he hit like some sort of record for him.
Mhm.
And this guy never made it. And he told me, he's like, you know, I can't remember like the point of the story or like the context of it because it was so long ago. But I remember he was like, he goes, I don't know if that guy ever learned anything from me, but I learned from him. And I remember that altering, like when I do an intake for somebody that maybe comes to the clinic and they have some sort of musculoskeletal issue, like
Mhm.
I'm utilizing them as a feedback, and then I'm using these like special strength models to start to figure out like, okay, I think they're talking about connective tissue, or I think they're talking about joint. So that then
Mhm.
I'm using their feedback to connect with them. And then as soon as I start to connect with them and we start to essentially be able to like be on the same page, then the results become great. If
Mhm.
you're
Yeah.
doing what you want to do and they're saying like you have to be able to take the athlete seriously, to listen to the athlete and to
Yep.
understand that like you have to take what they're saying and be able to understand what you have to do from a programming perspective.
Yeah, so it's almost like having an intimacy and a open-mindedness in those feedback loops, but you also got to be like deeply entrenched in them. at the
Hmm.
same time. So how, it's basically how far a coach is willing to go with the athlete and how open-minded they are to understanding the athlete's experience and validating it through the correct programming decisions.
Exactly. Because then you're just smooth sailing and you're both learning off of each other. And then next thing you know, they're going, "Hey, I think this is what I need to do." And you're like, "Well, they know."
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now they're making my job as a programmer easier. Oh, you like this? Or like case
Yeah.
in point, you pull something, they're like, "What the fuck did you pull that for?" And you're like, "Well, this is
Yeah.
why." And they're like, "Well, this is why I
No.
don't want it." And you're like, "Okay, well, perfect. It's back in there."
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Their kinesthetic IQ has to be on par enough, right? And developed enough to like give you that feedback and be right in that respect, which
Correct.
that's that. Yeah. I mean, I agree. Anytime I've had an athlete, it was that intuition that the sixth sense they had about what they needed versus not, that I was like, okay,
Hmm.
yeah, I love that. It's a
Yeah.
great way to think about it, man. I don't think many people have said it like that. Last question here. Time under tension makes sense. HIMA versus PIMA. But with isometrics, there is limited to no movement of tissues. Would this provide tissue breakdown or simply evaluate length of impulse and tissue/structural endurance for that impulse? Is this not a measure of a contraction without movement?
Okay. Okay. So this is where oscillating isometrics,
Mm-hmm.
they're correct in regard to HEMAs and PIMAs, but with oscillating isometric muscle actions,
Mm-hmm.
the muscle is holding, so the muscle is technically not moving. Like it
Mm-hmm.
may yield to a degree, but the top-down intent is to hold.
Mm-hmm.
But the connective tissue is oscillating like the resistance.
Yep.
Okay, so
Yep.
technically, like that oscillation has to be absorbed into the connective tissue, and that's what makes the oscillating isometric muscle actions so stimulatory for the bottom up element of reactive strength. Because if you think about it, like the nervous system, you get a top down cue, right? So think about it this way: you can have a top down cue of hold or press.
Mm-hmm.
In
Mm-hmm.
this case, it's a hold, but the
And then it's
weight
a
is
press.
oscillating.
And then it's a hold, and then it's a press, and then it's a hold, and then it's a press.
So it's oscillating between holding and pressing to a degree,
Yeah.
but the connective tissue is doing this. The connective
Yes.
tissue is self-organizing. I'll be very specific.
Hmm.
Okay, so connective tissue behaves on a length tension ratio.
Yep.
So for like 1 unit of length in normal tissue, for every 1 unit of length, you get a corresponding 1 unit of tension
Yes.
when you passively scale in length into the tissue. Okay. And so if you look at a band, an elastic band, like if I had a band and I took it to length,
Hmm.
right? For every 1 unit of length that I put in, I would get a corresponding unit of tension.
Yes.
You with me?
I'm with you. Yeah, that's why they have to use bands in space.
Correct. Okay, so if you have weight that's oscillating in there, the weight is
Hmm.
oscillating like this. So it's going length tension, like this. So the white
Hmm.
connective tissue is doing the same thing because it has the same length tension properties. So this behavior that you see of oscillation is actually occurring there. So it's technically not static. The red tissue is holding on so that all of that force can get absorbed into that white tissue. That's the reason why we propose that this is a new isometric muscle action because it's oscillating, right? And
Hmm.
that oscillation is that's the question that you were asking earlier. That's what synergizes the neurology with the biology to give you the behavior reactivity. That's why these
Hmm.
things are so potent in not just the strength world, but in the clinical world,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because right, so the time under tension, if you think about it, so the time under tension, so let's say that you hold it until it dissipates, and once it dissipates, it's at 5 seconds. It takes you 5 seconds. Like
Hmm.
that's enough time under tension to stimulate not just the behaviors of the ability to oscillate, like essentially absorb that force, but
Hmm.
also it's enough time under tension to build more tissue in that specific area.
And Cal Dietz does a lot of that in his training too, those oscillations. He almost like swears by oscillations, I think I've seen him say in some elements. But it's, kind of the different contraction types that you do involved around that and the speeds you move with those oscillations. That's like
So
super important. But what you're saying
so
was with that specific OIMA you guys have found, it's it's that specific position getting like it has to react. It's not you controlling the weight, maybe the way I've seen Cal Dietz's stuff do it. I could be very wrong about that.
so I've seen Cal Dietz stuff, and
Hmm.
it's different. It's not an
It's
oscillating
very
isometric.
different. Yep.
It's completely different. So they're not the
Yep.
same, because what he's saying is get the nervous system to oscillate the weight. What we're
Yep. And
saying
you're
is
saying the tissue.
no. What we're saying is we're going to use the nervous system to hold, so we get oscillations through the white connective tissue to scale up the white tissue.
Yes.
So the oscillations that he's doing is they're like oscillating on a bar.
Hmm.
I don't know what training effect that's going to give you, but it's not going to fall into connective tissue because of the top down output, or the top down intent, if that
Hmm.
makes sense. So
Yeah,
the
it totally
two
makes
are
sense.
yeah, so the two are technically totally different.
Yep.
I don't have the experience in doing the ones that he's saying, uh, but I have extensive experience with oscillating isometric muscle actions,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah. Yep.
I'm telling you that once you do them, you're not going to be able to pull them out of your programming,
Yeah.
because they're revolutionary, man. I'm telling you,
Hmm.
even from I'll give you just one case, one example. So
Hmm.
I compress a lot of the volume because there's so much shit that I have to train myself,
Yeah.
right? So for instance, I just posted this on Instagram last
Hmm.
night,
Yep.
and it's essentially oscillating load that at the top the chains come off, and I'm holding the isometric there. Okay, and that's training reactive strength in the bench press for me, and it's sub
Yes.
maximal because I do like almost like 20 something reps, and that's what
Yep.
I consider to be my quote unquote like neurological warm up, because it's but as I'm doing it, I feel all the connective tissue in my triceps and my pec and my rotator cuff and my lat, all that stuff, which then puts me in a position where then I can do, hit a training max, or I can do speed strength work, or whatever it is.
Because you've essentially to the old point like that you made with Otani, he's created that hump. You've created that hump.
Yeah,
Okay.
my because all think about it, that load has oscillated through all of my white connective tissue, and my
Yep.
white connective tissue has mechanoreceptors that
Yep.
send that force-based input into my nervous system. So
Yep.
every time I hold an oscillation, I go, oh, I can feel where my bones are, I can feel where my tissue is,
Yes.
right? And then
Yes.
I can do a better oscillating isometric muscle action, and a better one, and a better one, and a better one. But I'm training reactive strength, not a neurological thing. So that's why then I
Hmm.
can do that for my first set. The second set, I think I worked up to I did a 275 for maybe like a 4 to 7 just to acclimate to the load. And then I did 315. I did 315 with, and there's 40 pound band tension on a
Hmm.
super rhino flex bar.
Hmm.
But then that was essentially, and I did 2 reps and then a 1 and a 1, so it was kind of more of like almost like a, they would say like a rest pause set. That's kind of like, technically I should be a little bit more diligent with my volume and try to compress that down to 1, but I had nobody to spot me, so that's why I'm
Yeah,
listening in.
you gotta do it. Yeah, you are always at the constraint of what gym you get to train in today, right?
Yeah,
So yeah, okay,
yeah,
gotcha. I love that, man. Well, hey, dude, that was awesome. And I know there's probably so many takeaways people had from this, and questions they may even want to ask you directly. So where can people follow along? Because obviously you are at the tip of the spear, man. You are the point. When it relates to blending what we're seeing in the research, but then actually going and getting your hands dirty with athletes, which is why I have the utmost respect for what you do and how you're doing it. So how can people kind of follow along with you?
yeah. So my Instagram, that's probably like the easiest way.
Hmm.
That's just J Quint, NMT, like Nancy Mary Tom,
Hmm.
neuromuscular therapist.
Hmm.
And then Dr. Shivers, myself, and Paul Leduc, we have a Substack
Nice.
called Absolute: The Art and Science of Programming, or the Art and Science of High Performance. And
Hmm.
then we just launched 2 weeks ago. we just launched a programming learning module at Absolute. So it's
Mm-hmm.
called the Art and Science of Programming. We need to
Mm-hmm.
get you on there, man. I'm going to get
Oh,
you on there.
please, man. Yeah, I would love to. I'll be there in a heartbeat.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so like for all the programming stuff that we're talking about, it's all technically covered. It's a learning module, and so there's like I think like 4 weeks of it. It's you just do it online, and then at the end, everybody in that cohort essentially meets up, and we have feedback loops in there. So like as you're taking it, if you have any questions, you just submit the questions, and then we get the questions, and then that's essentially kind of
The
so
best way to do
so
it. Yeah. Yeah.
right. So it's a live course. It's changing. We're getting ready to add in practice to the component of it.
Cool.
We have a couple we had a couple pro organizations that were like early adopters. We've gotten really good feedback on it so far, but we know there's still improvement in
Mm-hmm.
there. So that's so absolute is the art and science of of human performance,
Mm-hmm.
and that's on Substack, and we have that learning module, the art and science of programming. And
Mm-hmm.
then Olin, myself, we have lineman special strength with Paul as well. So for people that are more like, offensive linemen, or they want to, if you want to view blocking as a special strength, that's kind of the place to go to.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
it's
And
technically
I
the
think
only.
it's really important because the way you talk about that stuff, I've been following it for years, man. Like it's always important to note Louis with the conjugate method was all geared towards equipped powerlifting. So
Mm-hmm.
everything he said is covered with that tint, right? But to
Mm-hmm.
truly understand conjugate, I think you need to dive into how people are applying it in other contexts, other sports. And the
Mm-hmm.
what you guys developed for the linemen is like how I think the gold standard of that. So for anyone
Mm-hmm.
listening, like you should go check that out. 100%.
Yeah, because we have a manual. We have a
Yep.
manual. I'll have to send you if you.
I
Yeah,
would love one.
because
Yeah.
yeah, I'll have to send it to you. So like these manuals are super popular. They're written for the linemen, right? Which
Yeah.
makes it fun. Olin and I, that was a fun project that
Yeah.
we did, and that's kind of the base of everything that we do.
Yep.
We've gotten a lot of good feedback from that, because the target is really like high school collegiate.
Yeah.
But hey, man, like NFL teams have been adopting this viewpoint as well, looking
Mhm.
at blocking as a special strength. And I
Mhm.
think that so to answer your question, and then at FRS,
Mhm.
essentially, myself, Dr. Spina, Dr. Shivers, we created the internal strength model, right? So the internal strength model is a component of FRS as well, which discusses essentially like strictly biological training, let's say.
Mhm. Beautiful. So yeah, if you want to learn how to do it, man, like actually implement all these things, it sounds like there's a lot of paths to success and a lot of paths to work with you directly. Which I can say, get out from behind the desk as quickly as possible and go work with John. Critical to my development for sure. I mean, you're the person who turned me on to all FRS's stuff when I was at Westside. That was like the very
Mm-hmm.
next rabbit hole I went down, and I felt like I
Spear.
could, yeah,
Spear in Chicago. I remember. I
yep,
remember. I assisted Dre with that seminar,
yep,
and you took
yep.
it. We were at Spear in Chicago. I remember.
Yep. Yeah. And it was an awesome one, man. I mean, you just can't walk away not pumped up to implement that stuff. And, having used it for years, I mean, we at the high school I was working at, you know, even just implementing basic pails, rails, cars, stuff that a high schooler can really like wrap their mind around from a training perspective in a room of 70 kids and one coach, like the only kids that got injured that year were the kids that showed up less than 50% of the time. Otherwise, we
Shocking.
made it through. Yeah, crazy how that happens, right? And I swear by it, dude. I mean, and it's what's so cool about it is like just a hit. You don't need to like every single thing doesn't need to be framed through it, but if you don't have it in the program,
Yeah.
it's a very binary 0 to 1 moment where it's got to be one. You can go to two, three,
Yeah.
four, five, however you see fit. But if you've got zero, good luck. You know what I mean? You
Yeah.
are you are not addressing the biology.
Yeah.
And so I'm very grateful, for that system and all you guys have developed because it has impacted people all over the world, probably in ways you guys don't even know.
Yeah, man. Listen, I really appreciate, first off, we use Bridge. So we use
Hmm.
Bridge at both Lyman Special Strength and Absolute. And I
Yeah.
use it in my own personal stuff too. So
Yeah.
I appreciate Bridge. I appreciate everything. You guys are making my life easier.
Yeah. A lot to
So
track
like
the way
look,
you're programming. So
yeah, yeah. So I appreciate Bridge and then specifically you, Cooper. I really appreciate
yeah.
you having me on here and in this conversation. And yeah, anything you guys need, let me know.
For sure. We'll keep a lookout. John was gracious enough to share a template with us for his hamstring protocol that he's leveraging with folks. So that'll be on our platform. And yeah, I know there's 33 people in here. I know at one point we had over 100. So thanks all the participants for sticking on for a while here. And yeah, the recording will be to you. And John, thanks, man. That'll wrap us up for today.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Cool. Later, y'all. See you.